Hey guys! Tonight we begin with something quietly fascinating, something old, soft, and a little secretive. We're stepping into a world where the bedroom was once a stage. The bride a symbol, and the sheets were sometimes more important than the ceremony. Tonight, you'll wander candlelit corridors of medieval castles and manors, where private rituals whisper behind tapestries, carried more weight than vows spoken in stone chapels. It's a story of veils and velvet, of mothers murmuring in corners, and of love that had less to do with hearts than with inheritance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there. But because good girls don't ask too many questions, a cousin whispered something about the white sheet. An older maid once muttered, half-jokingly, that you should chew parsley to stay fresh. But those are gentle euphemisms for what it really is, a place to demonstrate that a virgin girl has become a wife. No pressure. Right, the pillows have been plump, and the whole space has been subtly scented with lavender and chamomile. In wealthier households, there might even be silver bowls of sugared almonds placed nearby to symbolize sweetness and fertility. None of it made much sense. But now, it is here, the long-anticipated event that has somehow both celebration and silent ordeal, your wedding night, and the chamber meant to hold it. Maybe not through a keyhole, though some whisper that has happened, but in the morning. They will know. They will expect signs, evidence, whispers of blood on cloth, or a certain flush glow in your cheeks, or even the calm of a groom who doesn't look furious. The cloth was brought out. The next morning, paraded like a war flag. In others, the custom seems more symbolic, less about public evidence and more about quiet confirmation. This is a performance hall, a testing ground, and sometimes, if you're unlucky, a stage with an audience, metaphorically or literally. Many proofs of purity were staged. We'll get to that later. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in your room is thick with unspoken expectations. A maid folds your gown with extra care. She ties a ribbon around your wrist to charm against fear. Outside, your family drinks and sings. There are laughter and drums. But inside, it's quiet now. You sit at the edge of the bed, feeling the strange weight of history pressing against your chest like a stone. You wake up in a feather-stuffed bed, your feet tucked beneath a blanket someone else sewed. And tonight, you step into the old story, written not with ink, but with whispered myths and linens washed in rose water. The average age for marriage in many medieval regions hovered somewhere between 12 and 15 for girls of rank, though local customs varied. Kind, perhaps, or rough. Maybe he's nervous. 2, maybe not. But it doesn't matter. You are here. The chamber is waiting, and soon, the door will be closed. The younger ones might not even understand what's expected. The older ones might have heard the stories, some true, many terrifyingly exaggerated. Outside, it's still early. Dew glistens on the herbs in the courtyard garden, and the sheep in the field are quiet. Some brides are gently told by their mothers, just lie still and think of the saints. Others are given a vial of herbal wine to calm the nerves. Sometimes, a midwife is brought in before the wedding to check that everything appears intact. In some disturbing cases, it's an older relative doing the inspection, with fingers and frowns and far too much judgment. But inside the manor, there's already a quiet bustle. Someone's lit the cook fire. Somewhere, a servant hums. A wedding was a transaction, a consolidation of lands, a sealing of bloodlines. And what's sealed at best, in the eyes of your parents, the priest, and the neighbors? Your untouched body and proof that it had been properly handed over. And then there's you, freshly pledged, not yet wed, and just beginning to understand what all the hushed laughter and sideways glances are about. They've told you little, not because you're not important. In medieval Europe, marriage wasn't merely about love. In fact, love often had very little to do with it. You've heard the chamber called many things: the bridal suite, the betting room, the night chamber. In some regions, It's a proper room, lined with fresh rushes, with a special bed decorated in white. The sheets are crisp and pale. But despite the decorations, this is not a room of romance. Because here's the thing, people will be watching. You might be terrified. Most brides were. Even noble ones, especially young ones. You've been coached, but not clearly. There are customs, gestures, blessings, and then there's the husband. You've maybe spoken 5 words to him. He's older, or younger. Historians still argue whether this whole notion of displaying the bridal sheet with a bloodstain is folklore or fact. In some villages, yes, it was real, and in some cases, it was pure fiction. But tonight, it's all still before you. What's expected of you is old, ancient, even older than castles, older than kingdoms. You are betrothed before your body has fully become your own. That's the strange part. You barely know how to be a woman, yet suddenly, you're being measured for your place as someone's wife. It happens quickly, with few questions and fewer answers. You're told, gently but firmly, that it is a good match. The sudden flood of attention from women who now see you as a vessel to be filled with advice, warnings, and little bags of dried herbs tied with string. He is noble. He has land. His estate is in better shape than yours, and your dowry, modest though it may be, sweetens the arrangement. No one asks if he makes you smile. No one asks if he frightens you, or if you like the way he smells, or whether his eyes make your stomach flutter or your shoulders tense. To weigh the likelihood of scandal. Did she play with boys in the orchard? Was she caught swimming alone in the pond last summer? Why did she once speak to the falconer's apprentice without a chaperone? Some frowns, pursed lips. You hear the word pure more in 1 week than you have in your entire life. And it's not just the men who care, oh no. The older women are often the fiercest gatekeepers of this mysterious purity. They've played this game. They've earned their place. And now they stand as guardians of the gate you're about to pass through. Some noble girls are betrothed at 12 but remain with their mothers until they are of age. Of course, what constitutes of age is murky and deeply uncomfortable by today's standards. In many places, 14 was considered appropriate, sometimes younger. The church tried, occasionally, to push it closer to 16, but customs varied wildly by region and wealth. There were no love notes slipped into your palm, no forbidden kisses behind a hedge. In others, the bedding was rushed, regardless of readiness. The truth lies somewhere in between, and much depended on how eager the husband was to secure his heir. A stern-faced aunt arrives. You learn to curtsy deeper, to braid your hair in the style of married women, to keep your hands folded, and to never be alone with a man who is not your kin, not anymore. She pinches your chin. The touch of someone else, the closeness, the strangeness, the blood. You do not dread it, exactly. But it doesn't feel like something you are choosing. Examine your posture and ask vague questions about your cycles. Girls your age giggle and blush when they see you. Older women seem to nod at you with something like solemn approval. Men are more formal. Some look away quickly, as if unsure whether they are allowed to even speak your name. She speaks in riddles, something about how a red thread must be woven on the wedding night. You nod, even though it makes no sense. But you learn later what she meant, and your stomach knots a little more. Virginity, after all, is a currency, and the coin must be unspoiled. Instead, there was a meeting of fathers and uncles, a clerk, a lot of parchment, some nods, and then it was done. You were promised. Not quite taken, but no longer free. Those aren't the kinds of questions people think to ask. She kisses your forehead and doesn't say much. The next day, a trunk appears at the foot of your bed, molded, bent gently but persistently toward the center of your fate. Inside it, linens, oils, a special shift embroidered with tiny bluebirds. You're told to keep it untouched until the wedding. You remember the day the match was agreed upon. It wasn't romantic. You do not laugh too loudly or run too fast. And above all, in your body, specifically, the part of it that must remain untouched until the proper night. Eyes are watching, always watching. In some families, you're secluded. Your time is spent learning how to tend a fire, how to weave a modest hem, how to kneel just so in prayer. But in others, you are paraded subtly, of course. Not like a prize sow, but not unlike one, either. And so begins the slow turn of the wheel, the betrothal ceremony, the announcement to your village or town. From now on, everything you do reflects on your readiness. You eat carefully. You walk with your back straight. Your value lies in the joining of houses, the weaving of names. It's not that you're unloved. In truth, you may be deeply cherished. Your mother may weep softly when brushing your hair. Your nursemaid may slip you sweets when no one is looking. But even their warmth cannot bend the iron rules that surround your future. Once your dowry is negotiated, you're no longer entirely theirs. You've become a kind of beautiful promise tied to land, inheritance, and honor. And that promise is guarded fiercely. Before the wedding, there will be many visitors. Not always to see you directly, but to sniff around the match. These are the whispers that flutter through the halls like anxious birds, because even a whiff of impropriety could disrupt everything. You overhear things, words you don't fully understand, but the tone tells you enough. There are nods. One morning, that same afternoon, your mother disappears behind closed doors with her. When she returns, her eyes are tired. The pressure builds softly, like water filling a basin. You are not forced, you are shaped. You start to notice how the conversation changes when you walk into a room. You belong to the marriage now. You are its bud, about to bloom under a groom's hand, whether tender or not. There is one small mercy. Sometimes, if your match is made young, you do not go to him immediately. Historians still argue whether consummation was always immediate in some accounts. Couples were married in name but lived apart until the girl's body matured. And so, you prepare, not just your room, but your whole being. One night, alone in your bed, you stare at the beams above your head and wonder what it will be like. It feels like something that is already decided, like a play in which your lines are written, and all you must do is walk on stage when the bell tolls. The day inches closer. The chamber waits. The wedding itself is a spectacle, but the real ceremony begins long before the vows. It starts with quiet negotiations, hushed meetings over maps and ledgers, and long glances exchanged between fathers. You're not present for these discussions. You're in another room, perhaps embroidering a cloth you'll never use, or sipping watered wine while women hover too close and comment too loudly. He has agreed, your father might say, as if your life were a field newly leased. Your mother's face is unreadable. She's been here before. Perhaps she was once told her own fate with the same dispassionate calm. The men are deciding your future. That's simply how it's done. You're told of your engagement not with fanfare, but with a calm, matter-of-fact tone as if announcing the weather, and a small stretch of barley field. These are your worth, tallied and ink. You learn the lesson early, not your smile, not your wit, not the softness of your voice when singing to birds. By the window, a few neighbors gather. There's mulled wine, songs, perhaps a small feast. The two families exchange formal gifts. Or he may try to be kind, offering stiff compliments or asking after your favorite color as though it matters. You answer politely. Your mother's gaze is on you from across the room, and you've been trained not to giggle or stammer. Sometimes, a ring is given, not necessarily a wedding ring, but a token of promise. It might not fit. You don't say anything if it doesn't. No. What matters now is the richness of your linen, the purity of your bloodline, and your capacity to give sons. You're measured for your gown, your veil. Special slippers are sewn. There are questions about colors and fabrics though, of course. The final decision lies with your mother or the seamstress. If you say a prayer to St. Agnes before bed, you'll dream of your husband. You are dressed for display, not expression. You learn that your dowry is to include for bolts of Flemish wool to silver goblets. It is as if they were preparing you for battle, but refusing to say what kind of weapon you'll need. You smile tightly. These comments are supposed to flatter you. In certain noble houses, Older female relatives might give detailed and deeply awkward lectures on what to expect. In peasant villages, you might learn from a sister or friend in hushed whispers behind a barn, just for a few minutes. You slip outside, past the kitchen garden, to where the air is heavy with mint and thyme. It's more like being at the top of a hill, just before the sled starts sliding. Long enough to listen to the faint, rhythmic beat of hammers in the courtyard where your marriage bed is being reinforced. No way to stop it now, only the rush of inevitability. It's quiet there. No one speaks. You watch the sky shift into pink and gold, and your heart tightens strangely. A dowry isn't just a gift. It's leverage, protection, a contract, really one that says, if you ruin her family's investment. But you know better than to expect it. A daughter is wealth onto legs, walking into someone else's home. You wonder what kind of husband he'll be. Will he be tender? Will he be patient? Will he say your name gently? So, the accounting begins. There are scribes, witnesses, wax seals. They bring with them strange gifts, dried rose petals, white candles, a pouch of crushed lavender, and, once, rather alarmingly, a dried lizard foot wrapped in red thread. You're told it brings fertility. You tuck it away, unsure whether to be grateful or horrified. If your family is wealthy enough, the documents will be ornate, filled with flourishes and legal Latin that no one really reads. If you are of humbler means, perhaps only the priest writes it down in his register, and it is witnessed by a local reeve or two. You're not consulted, of course. You simply hear raised voices, and later, your aunt clucks her tongue and says something about how you'll need to learn to be flexible. Still, the contract is binding. Dowries are serious business. Sometimes, disputes break out over a mare's health or whether a plot of land included in the deal floods too often. Flexible, a strange word. It means pliant. It means yielding. It means smiling when you want to scream and bowing when you want to bolt. You begin to understand that your body is a bridge between estates, between ambitions. You are not quite person, not quite property, something in between. The betrothal is celebrated, though usually on a smaller scale than the wedding. You and your betrothed may stand next to each other in the hall, awkward and silent. He may not speak to you at all. The elders may joke something about how fine your children will look or how your hips seem suited to motherhood. They do not. You watch him as discreetly as you can. He's taller than you expected. His fingers are ink-stained. His jaw is clean-shaven for once. You hope so. In the days after the betrothal, preparations begin in earnest. There are endless meetings. Women crowd into your room to plan, to gossip, to offer advice. Whispers abound. Don't eat garlic the night before. Comb your hair 100 strokes. They mean well. Mostly. These women, these strange, bustling birds who flutter around you with their folklore and half-truths. But their smiles are too wide, their glances too knowing. Historians still argue about how much the average bride knew. Some girls were coached carefully, others were left entirely ignorant. And in other cases, you knew nothing, absolutely nothing, until the moment came. There's a moment, near dusk when you escape the preparations. You know that when you walk back inside, things will never be the same. It's not dread, exactly. It's not quite fear. You sit there a little longer, long enough to feel the breeze on your bare forearms. Tomorrow, you'll lie in it, and they'll expect proof. The inspection isn't always spoken of, but you begin to feel it long before it happens. A look here, a lowered voice there, a maid tugging your bodice just a little tighter, remarking to casually that your figure should appear modest but promising. Every ribbon tied, every spoonful of soup you consume, even the way you cough, it's all weighed in the balance. Or it may be more explicit, a matronly hand pressed gently, uninvited, to your lower belly. A question about your bleeding, cloaked in euphemism. A dowager or midwife may be summoned to privately confirm that all is as it should be, not for your comfort. Of course, the flower must not have bloomed too soon. One woman whispers, They are both participants and enforcers of a system that reduces young girls to silk-draped symbols of family honor. These older women handle you with a kind of reverence. Like a piece of delicate porcelain, they straighten your hair, check your breath, and mutter prayers that sound half like spells. You feel more like an artifact than a person. Another hints, with a slight chuckle, that she once used a clove of garlic to check for purity. You have no idea what that means, but to ensure the dowry isn't wasted on a girl who may have fallen before the marriage, a candle passed between your legs to read the shadow, as one old superstition goes. And among the many unstated rituals comes one of the strangest: the quiet evaluation of your readiness by the women in your family. One day, she brings you a small bottle of lavender oil with a hint of camphor, but there is a sorrow in her eyes that is hard to miss when she laces your gown or tucks a strand of hair behind your ear. Perhaps she remembers her own inspection. Perhaps she knows the weight you're about to carry. For calming the nerves, she says, though her voice is shaking. Another aunt insists on inspecting your walk, murmuring about posture and how a respectable gait should never suggest much softness in the hips. A trick passed from sister to sister. You hear a version of this from one of the scullery maids. Then make sure it shows on the sheets. No one ever knows. She tells it like a fairy tale. All wide eyes and hushed laughter in many cases. It was more about ritualized reassurance than any real physical examination. But records exist: letters, legal documents, even church complaints that hint at a troubling level of control over a young bride's body, particularly among the elite, where inheritance and legitimacy were everything. Ants bustle in and out of your quarters, measuring drapes and testing mattresses, muttering about linen thickness and easy washing. You hear the phrase blood-proofed for the first time. You don't ask, or at least, pure enough. You're allowed to walk in the gardens again, to take longer baths. You are no longer questioned so much. Everyone begins to smile at you again. Every breath you take is for the sake of that one night. Every bath, every ribbon tied into your hair, every herbal tea brewed under the new moon. The entire household begins orbiting around you like bees around a blossom. Not because they adore you, but because you're now the centerpiece of a delicate transaction. It may happen in a subtle way, a series of comments, subtle prods and pokes under the guise of helping you dress. In some households, there's a formal inspection, yes, even as recently as the late medieval period, especially among the nobility and poorer families. The concern was less about virginity and more about survival. If a daughter could marry well, even with a questionable reputation, it might still be seen as a blessing. But for the landed classes, a stain on your chastity could mean social death. It refers to the stage when a girl becomes ready for marriage, when her hips begin to round and her voice lowers. In theory, it means fertility. In practice, it means scrutiny, endless, silent, intrusive scrutiny. The language used is vague, deliberately foggy, and wrapped in a kind of polite horror. And yet, the women performing these inspections are not cruel. At least, not always. They've simply been through it themselves. There's a strange intimacy in it, all terrifying, yes, but oddly tender. And then there are the whispers. Always the whispers. She's quiet. That's good. She's too thin. Let's hope he likes small women. I heard she once spoke to the butcher's son when no one was looking. The last one lingers. You remember the conversation. It lasted mere seconds. He asked if you like pears. You'd said yes. But in the world of marriage readiness, even pears can become a scandal. Your mother never addresses these things directly. She simply fusses over your wardrobe more than usual. You begin to sense her sadness more clearly now. She's proud of you, of course. There's a term used in some regions, the ripening. Historians still debate the extent to which these premarital inspections were truly medical or ceremonial, of course. Not all girls face such formal rituals. There are even rumors, barely veiled whispers, that some girls fake their way through the inspection, using bladders of goat's blood, inserting small cloth stained with herbs. You just fold it up nice, like a ribbon, she says. You don't know whether to be relieved or horrified. Eventually, the inspection passes. You've been declared pure. But now there's another layer beneath it, an expectation. They've judged you worthy. And so the next part must go smoothly. There is still time before the wedding. But now that you've been silently certified, the preparations for the virginity chamber take on new urgency. And your body now feels like a performance waiting to happen. Your innocence is no longer yours. It is a gown you wear, one that will be removed not in intimacy, but in ceremony. The door is nearly shut, the key is being turned, and still, no one asks if you're ready. Because ready or not, you are expected to bloom. On the morning before the wedding, your chamber is warm with the scent of rose oil and simmering cloves. Steam rises from a copper basin where petals float lazily across the surface, drifting like thoughts too shy to speak aloud. The other is a midwife who's known your family for decades. She hums while working, her hands moving in circles, always clockwise, always with a rhythm that feels half sacred and half spell. Not just cleanse your body, but prepare your soul. But for you, the simple rose and lavender will do. Your mother insisted on it. Each touch is careful, each movement choreographed like a lullaby. You sit in a chair near the hearth while your hair is unbraided and brushed 100 strokes, as is custom. Her lips are pink from rose salve. Her hair, thick and lustrous, smells of rosemary and clove. Her eyes are quiet. She is lovely, and she is terrified. You remember being a child, sitting like this in your mother's lap, and the memory feels as if it belongs to someone else. The women do not look directly into your eyes. They don't need to. You are not the girl from yesterday. You are the bride now. Not too much, she murmurs. You mustn't smell like you're trying. The idea of bridal purification predates churches and bishops. It's a whisper from pagan times, wrapped now in the lace of sacraments. Historians debate whether the church approved of these bathing customs. In some regions, they were encouraged, rebranded as symbolic baptisms. In others, they were frowned upon as sensual, to suspiciously joyful. Then she lifts a velvet pouch from her belt and draws out a vial the color of honey. She uncorks it, and the scent is strange, sharp, earthy, not unpleasant. And this bath is the last time your body is solely your own. The bed behind you is freshly made, the sheets tighter than drumskin. They will wrinkle soon. They are meant to. It must smell like innocence, she said with a half smile. Folding towels she won't let the servants touch. Perhaps even dancing. The wedding feast continues without you. Your role in the revelry is complete. To open your heart, and perhaps, more pragmatically, to soften your skin. Hair is rinsed with water infused with rosemary and sage. If the bride was tense, uncomfortable, or frightened, she might resist. She might cry. She might fail. And failure, in this case, was not easily forgiven. If someone has warned him not to rush, not to hurt you, not to be unkind, you nibble one, though your stomach turns gently. There's a cup of warmed wine, slightly bitter, tinged with mugwort. In some cultures, he was coached by older men, encouraged to be assertive, even dominant. In others, he was told to be gentle, to remember the girl was not a prize, but a partner. The advice varied wildly, region by region, house by house. A calming draft, they said. A thin shift has slipped over your body, white, of course, embroidered with the tiniest blue flowers around the neckline. You're not meant to wear anything beneath it. It's part of the tradition. Soft fabric, bare skin, and the faint shimmer of perfume. You're meant to be both modest and available. Elbows and knees are scrubbed gently with cloth soaked in wine. Behind your ears, the midwife rubs a tincture said to encourage a calm mind. You're told to undress slowly, not for show but for reverence. This is the bride's bath. The copper stings a little. Where it's touched by flame below, you sink slowly, breath catching in your throat. The women begin to speak of nothing in particular. The year's plum harvest, the bees, a cousin's upcoming journey to ruin. But beneath the casual chatter lies something else, the slow layering of intention. To older women tend to you not servants today, but women of the family. One is your great aunt, soft-voiced and hawk-eyed. You step into the water, not quite hot, not quite cool. The bath is meant to purify. In wealthier households, this ritual bath might include goat's milk, crushed almonds, even a dash of saffron. They wash you in silence now, not from awkwardness, but from respect. Afterward, you're wrapped in linen so fine it catches the candle light. A mirror is held before you. You hardly recognize the girl staring back. Her skin is glowing. Next come the oils. Your great aunt dabs a small amount of ambergris behind your knees, at the base of your neck, and just above your navel. It's for courage, she says. My mother gave it to me. Now it's yours. You nod, because what else is there to do? These rituals are old, far older than Christianity, some say. But the women never gave them up. Too much was riding on this night. So, the bath helped, the oils, the combing, the prayers. You're led from the chamber with your hair still damp. As twilight falls, you are left alone. For a time, a fire crackles in the grate. Someone has placed sweetmeats on the table, spiced figs, honeyed almonds, dried apples. You stare at the door. Eventually, he will arrive. But for now, you are alone. You lie back on the bed, arms over your head, and listen. Somewhere down the hall, laughter, the sound of a lute. Now comes the quieter theater. You wonder if he's nervous too, if he's been bathed and brushed and blessed. There's no guarantee. Historians are divided on what was expected of the groom. Some young husbands arrived as frightened as their brides. Others arrived as conquerors. You close your eyes. Your hands fold over your stomach. Your heart beats in your throat. The candle flames flicker. The sheets feel impossibly cold against your legs. The door creaks open, and the Virginity chamber, finally, begins to earn its name. The door doesn't slam, it clicks, quietly, deliberately. A pause follows, heavy, awkward. You don't turn your head. You don't know whether to rise or remain still. You murmur something in return, too quiet to remember later. He smells of clove and soap, with the faintest edge of wine. Not drunk, but not entirely sober either. Just fortified. You feel a strange surge of pity for him, for both of you, really. He says something about the music downstairs, a polite observation. You nod. Another pause. Then he reaches out slowly and touches your wrist. It's not unpleasant. His hand is warm. You've imagined this touch for weeks, and still it feels like an intrusion wrapped in kindness. To strangers in a ritual neither of you chose. Not exactly. The words don't matter. The room is already brimming with the things that haven't been said. This time, it's your collarbone, then your shoulder. He whispers your name again, not possessively, but like a question he doesn't know how to answer. There is no manual for this part, no scripture, no sermon that tells you where your hands should rest or whether to smile. Historians have recorded strange customs, like witnesses leading the couple to bed, tucking them in, even staying long enough to offer advice or give a toast. But others were more merciful, allowing the bride and groom a veil of privacy, so long as the morning brought acceptable proof. So, you breathe slowly and wait for him to speak. He says your name, first, softly, tentatively. It's not unpleasant, but it catches on the air like a thread snagging on a nail. In certain parts of Europe, particularly among the nobility, the linens were inspected the next day, sometimes by family, sometimes by a midwife. In the most dramatic cases, they were displayed publicly, hung from a window or waved like a flag. He approaches the bed. His boots are gone, left outside the chamber, as custom dictates, carefully, as if unwrapping a gift he's not sure he deserves. You've heard that not all girls bleed their first time, that tension, fear, or even youthful anatomy can make a difference. You feel as though you've been cracked open and resealed, not broken, no, but altered, like iron bent in fire, changed into a shape you don't yet recognize. You've also heard the other kind of whispers, the ones that suggest trickery, goose blood, pig's bladders, hidden pouches of dye. You lie awake, eyes tracing the wooden beams above, but enough to slip into a fog of dreams where no one checks the sheets. and your name is simply your own. You count them slowly, as if their number might soothe you. 1, 2, 3. A small spider crosses the ceiling without hurry. You envy its freedom. He leans over you. The movement is slow, like a statue deciding to shift at last. There's a moment when your breath and his overlap. You feel the heat of his skin, his hesitation. You didn't look. You don't want to. His hope, his fear, too strangely comforting. The door doesn't open, but you know someone waits. No lustful turn. Instead, he hesitates, then gently lifts the hem. You watch him dress without speaking. He folds the sheet. You cannot see his expression. Then, he walks to the door and opens it just wide enough to pass it through. You sit up slightly to help, more out of instinct than desire. The fabric pulls at your waist, then slips over your shoulders. Your skin tightens at the draft. Somewhere in the firewood, a log pops. Beneath it, his shirt is laced tightly at the collar. The warmth of him is strange, foreign, but not unbearable. Mostly, you feel absence, the hollowness of being washed by history, even when alone. You've seen it before, but only from across courtyards or at formal dinners. Now, he's shedding it before you like bark peeling from a tree. There are no witnesses inside the room, but it doesn't feel private. The weight of the house presses in from the walls, from the stillness of the hallway, from the firelight flickering on the silver goblet someone left near the hearth. He sits on the edge of the bed, not close, not yet. He removes his doublet. You realize with some detachment that you are watching the beginning of a deeply awkward dance. Your shift is next. There is no urgency. You're bare, but not fully vulnerable yet. Not until he touches you again. And then, slowly, the bedding ceremony continues. In some medieval traditions, the newlyweds weren't truly alone. It is, after all, not the act itself that society demands as the outcome. The blooded sheet was not merely rumor, but the expectations were not always based in biology. Better a clever girl than a shamed one, a maid once muttered while folding linens. Still, tonight, you do not intend to deceive. You close your eyes and let your hands rest on your stomach, because, now you know, he's as unready as you are. The act itself is brief. Not gentle, not brutal, just necessary. You wince. He whispers something you don't catch. The pain is sharp and then dull. When it's over, he lies beside you, breathing shallowly. He sleeps, or pretends to. Eventually, you doze. Not deeply, not peacefully. Morning comes too soon. The first knock is gentle. A woman's hand, you suspect. The second knock is firmer. He rises first. No one says a word. You don't know if the linen is stained, but someone else will. They do not burst in with trumpets or cheers. No, the aftermath is quieter than you'd expected. Too quiet, as if the whole household has paused to hold its breath and wait for the results of a silent exam. Somewhere beyond the door, you know someone is unfolding the white sheet right now, fingertips hovering over fabric. Eyes narrowing, lips pressing together in calculation. You're still in bed, motionless beneath the linen that now feels heavier than your own bones. He is gone, slipped away with the sunrise and his tunic still half buttoned. No goodbye, no soft reassurance, just the faint smell of his presence clinging to the pillows. You listen. You don't know what for. The shuffling of footsteps, perhaps, a cough, a cheer. But what you hear is worse. A hush, the kind that falls before a verdict. And then a voice, a woman's, just outside your door. Quiet. It will be fine, she says to someone else. But not to you. In some parts of medieval Europe, the bedding cloth was taken directly to a family matron, who would inspect it for proof, as though flesh and love and pain could be captured in a single crimson mark. In other places, the sheet was simply noted and passed back into household laundry, never mentioned again unless someone wished to gossip. Historians still argue whether this custom was as widespread as popular legend suggests. Some believe the proof cloth was a symbolic relic used only in elite households. Others claim it was common across all classes, even down to peasant cottages with straw mattresses and patchwork quilts. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, half history, half performance. But what is certain is this: the pressure to bleed was real. You do not know whether you did. The sharpness of the moment blurred everything. There was heat, friction, breath, then pain, then stillness. You recall something wet, but it could have been anything: sweat, wine, fear. And now, someone else knows more about your body than you. Dude, there's a knock softer this time. A servant girl enters, eyes lowered. She offers you warm water and a cloth. You clean yourself slowly, delicately. Your thighs ache faintly. There's tenderness in places you've never thought about before. You wipe the inside of your knees with shaking hands. The linen cloth comes away mostly clean. You aren't sure how to feel about the dot. The girl doesn't ask questions. She offers a small smile. Not quite sympathy, not quite relief. Then she helps you into a fresh shift, pale blue, trimmed with white embroidery at the cuffs. For the day after, she says softly. You wonder how many brides she's dressed like this. At breakfast, everyone pretends to be casual. The main hall smells of roasted oats and honey, fresh bread, apples baked with cinnamon. But there is an edge to the atmosphere, like a blade hidden in a bouquet. The servants glance at you differently now. Some smile too much. Others avoid eye contact entirely. Your mother hugs you, then pulls back too quickly. Your father nods at you from across the room, then pours himself more wine than usual. The chambermaid offers you a sugar plum, as if to say, well, that's that. No one speaks of the sheet. No one mentions the blood, but the silence around it is thick enough to chew later. Two ants corner you near the corridor leading to the garden. One of them raises an eyebrow. The other simply pats your hand and whispers, well done, little dove. You blink. You had not realized it was a test you could pass or fail. The rest of the day moves slowly, like honey down a cold spoon. You are congratulated, praised, toasted. Your name is used in strange combinations now. Lady, wife, woman of the house. You barely recognize the person they're describing. At some point, he appears again. Your husband. He kisses your cheek, warm, fleeting, polite, like an acquaintance. No one can quite tell whether to joke or to be solemn. He doesn't speak much, but then again, he doesn't need to. His presence is enough to confirm that the chamber has been used, and you have crossed the threshold. One woman, a distant cousin, far too bold, leans in and asks under her breath if it was as frightening as they say. You smile, not because it's funny, but because you've run out of ways to respond to things you don't know how to answer. You do not tell her the truth. You do not say that it felt like a riddle you weren't meant to solve, that the air in the room had tasted like old parchment, that afterward you'd stared at the ceiling and thought of nothing at all. Instead, you nod and say, it was fine, because that's what they want to hear. After lunch, you're given a new key. It's yours now, symbolically, at least. The key to the household coffers, or the grain store, or perhaps just your jewelry chest. But everyone sees it as something else, the mark of your new role. You are mistress of something now. It's not power, exactly, but it's something. You walk through the halls differently now, not because you've changed, no, but because the way people see you has. A child no longer, not a virgin, not a maiden. You are a wife. And wives are held to different expectations. That night, your husband does not visit your chamber. There's no need. The first betting is done. The proof has been gathered, whether real or conjured. He drinks in the hall with your father. They speak of crops, or taxes, or politics. You don't ask. You take your evening meal in private and sleep early, wrapped in a blanket that smells of rosemary and something faintly metallic. The following morning's blur. You are now in a kind of quiet limbo, not celebrated, not watched, but never unnoticed. The memory of the virginity chamber lingers, as do the shadows it cast. You are no longer the girl preparing. You are the woman who has arrived, and yet it does not feel like an arrival, not really. It feels more like the beginning of something vast and unknowable, a garden behind a locked gate, a story still unfolding, quietly, beneath your skin. The virginity chamber is behind you now, but it clings like damp wool unseen, but unmistakable. You no longer walk with the anxious poise of a bride-to-be, yet you also don't stride with the confidence of a seasoned mistress. You're in between, like morning mist after the sun has risen, but before the warmth has truly burned through. Everything about your day is the same, and nothing is. You take your meals at a table where you are now seated with greater formality. A few inches farther from the hearth, a few closer to the head, the servants use your new title. The steward, who barely acknowledged you a week ago, now bows stiffly when you pass. He says melody as if testing the shape of it on his tongue. And your husband, he is cordial, even kind. He smiles when he sees you, asks if you've eaten, tells you about the weather or the fields or the falcons. But he doesn't ask how you feel, or whether you're afraid, or if your body still aches in places you didn't know could ache. This, too, is part of it, the after, the quiet arrangement of lives. Each morning, you are expected to rise early, as all respectable wives do. The days of sleeping late and wandering barefoot through the kitchens are over. Now, you attend to the household books, however limited your education may be. You walk with the housekeeper and observe the drying meats, the stacks of grain, the counting of candles. You learn to say things like, "We may need more honey for winter." And the rye bread is to Corstel the cook. You are being shaped again, but differently now. Less like clay, more like parchment. Written upon, there are duties, 1,000 small things, the stitching of household banners, the inspection of linens, even the care of certain herbs in the garden: fennel, sage, feverfew. Not just for flavor, but for health, for balance, for the quiet healing that women have always done when no one was watching. And then there are the visitors. They come in trickles, like soft rain. An uncle, a merchant cousin, a friend of your husband's from across the valley. They arrive with their polite gift-scarf boxes, bolts of fabric, honeycake sand, their not-so-polite curiosity. They all want to see the new wife. Some look to long, others barely glance at you. But all of them are cataloging, assessing. Did your husband choose well? Is she fertile? Is she clever enough to keep a house? Will she embarrass the name? They ask the same questions in different guises. How is the chamber? They ask, meaning, has she taken to her role? She looks well rested, they say, meaning, has she performed without complaint? Sometimes, they simply say nothing at all. They just nod, and their wives later slip you glances, some pitying, some admiring, some unreadable. You notice that women judge differently, not always more kindly, just differently. One older noblewoman visits with her daughter. She watches you closely during the midday meal, says nothing about the chamber, but before leaving, she places a small bundle in your hand, dry jarro, chamomile, and a slip of paper with a handwritten charm. For ease, she says, when the time comes again, you thank her. You do not ask what she means by again. The truth is, no one tells you how often the bedding must occur. Once, weekly, whenever your husband desires. It depends on him, on the household, on what is whispered in the shadows of your body. And there is one question that lingers, unsaid, but ever present. When will the baby come? You feel it in the eyes of the older women, in the careful glance your husband's mother gives your waist, in the cup of milk pressed into your hand with murmurs about fullness and warmth. You haven't bled since the wedding night, but it's too soon to tell, too soon to know if your womb has begun its work. Historians often note that a noblewoman's success was measured in sons, not smiles, that her legacy was not her character, but her cradle. A barren wife could be set aside. A fruitful one secured her place. And so, the waiting begins. You are watched for signs. An extra yawn, a refusal of wine, a cramp, a sigh, a quiet moment. spent touching your belly absent-mindedly. All of it is noted. You do not know if you are with child. But you do know this: your body no longer belongs to you alone. Every movement is speculation. Every silence is a clue. You find yourself longing, strangely, for the simplicity of the preparation days, when the worst was unknown, when the chamber was just a story, when you were not yet expected to become an altar for the future. One afternoon, you walk in the garden, alone, at last. The sun is warm. Bees hum lazily between the lavender stalks. You pause by the herbs rue, lemon balm, motherwort, plants your mother once taught you in hushed tones. You pick a sprig of mint, crush it between your fingers. The scent rises fresh and sharp. For a moment, the world is still. You close your eyes. There is life ahead, possibly growing inside you, possibly not. You are not merely a bride now. You are the keeper of something larger than yourself and heir. A household, a reputation, a hope. The virginity chamber is closed, but the echoes of it remain. In the way you walk, in the way you are watched, and in the quiet way you now begin to watch yourself. It's in the stitching that you begin to make sense of it all, in the slow, deliberate act of drawing thread through linen, forming tiny, even loops. The same motion your mother once showed you in a sun-drenched room full of geraniums and hens. Scratching outside. You were barely tall enough to see over the windowsill then. Now, you sew for your own household, monograms for pillowcases, initials on kerchiefs. The beginnings of a christening gown, not because you are certain, but because hope has its own rhythm now, and it hums beneath your fingertips with every stitch. There is something grounding in the fabric, the way it holds still, no matter how your thoughts wander. You've been drifting ever since the wedding, adrift in this quiet sea of scrutiny and expectation. But here, needle in hand, you find a small, firm shore. Sometimes you embroider flowers, poppies, thistles, rosemary. Other times, birds. There's an owl, a falcon, once even a heron with outstretched wings. You like how strong it looks, as if about to fly. The women who visit you comment politely on your skill, but you notice they never ask what the birds mean. They mean escape, but you don't tell them that. Your husband comes to your chamber occasionally now, not every night, and never announced. He knocks softly, then enters with the same careful composure he wore at the wedding. He is not cruel. He is even, at times, attentive. But there is a distance in him, a kind of ceremonial affection. He asks if you're well, offers you a small piece of fruit, a folded scrap of poetry, once. His touch is dutiful, not desirous, and you do not tremble anymore. But you do not seek it either. The physical act has become like a prayer spoken, in a foreign tongue, memorized, but not felt. Perhaps in time it will soften. Perhaps love is like dough, it needs warmth, pressure, patience. You think these things in the quiet afterward, when you lie staring at the rafters and wonder if a baby is beginning its secret life within you. The midwife visits after your second miss bleeding. She comes bearing mint tea and iron tablets. She examines your eyes, your nails, your pulse. She asks no questions about the wedding night, only whether your lower back aches, whether your stomach feels denser than usual. You nod. You don't know if it's real, or if your body has simply learned how to lie. She gives you a ribbon red silk braided into a loop for your wrist, she says, to remind you to walk slowly and speak gently. You slip it on without protest. Pregnancy, in this world, is not a personal matter. It's a public event in slow motion. You are now the center of a quieter kind of pageant. Every meal is served to you with additional scrutiny, more broth, malati. Avoid the soft cheese. Would you like the goose egg today? And every symptom is relayed like prophecy. You sneeze once, and a maid swears it means a boy. You cradle your belly absently, and someone rushes to fetch a pillow. You crave vinegar. Your mother-in-law whispers it's a sign of strength. He'll be a soldier, she says, already planning the color of his first tunic. You do not correct her. You do not say that it could be a girl, or nothing, or a trick of the moon and your own want. Instead, you nod. You've learned that nodding is the safest spell you possess. Meanwhile, the same chamber is being prepared again. Not with flowers and perfumes this time, but herbs and swaddles. Linens are folded, stacked high. The cradle, stored in a dusty corner of the storeroom for years, is brought out and polished. It creaks faintly as it rocks. Someone sews tiny socks with lamb's wool. Your aunt gives you a necklace with a carved. Would charm Saint Margaret, patron of childbirth. You wonder if she smiled when her time came. If her pain was holy. Your dreams change, too. They become warmer, but stranger. In one, you walk through an orchard heavy with pears. In another, you're sewing by moonlight. But the thread keeps turning to gold. You wake with your hand on your stomach, fingers tracing circles without thinking. Historians still question how early medieval women recognized pregnancy. There was no sure way to confirm it before movement. What the French called the quickening when the child first fluttered within like a moth trapped behind ribs. Some women waited anxiously for that moment. Others claimed to know instantly. Still others carried swollen bellies full of gas and superstition, only to find themselves empty-handed months later. It was not always joy. It was not always certain. You feel the shift in your body before anyone else does. Not movement, no, not yet. But something has changed. The world tilts ever so slightly. Your hips ache by evening. Your ankles swell faintly if you stand too long. And the small mole on your wrist has turned a shade darker. As your nurse once said it would. You begin to hum, without thinking, soft, tuneless notes as you fold baby linens or press your palm over the slight rounding of your belly. You do not sing, not yet. That would feel like naming a wish aloud. But you do speak to the quiet, to the air around you, to the space that might, just might, be a child. The virginity chamber is not mentioned anymore. No one references the sheet, or the whispers, or the hush that fell after the first night. It has passed from public record to personal myth, something everyone remembers. But no one discusses now. The story has changed now. You are the vessel, and the waiting begins again. The first time you feel the movement, it's not dramatic. Not like the fluttering wings the poets describe. Not a sudden kick or a jolt that turns your breath to steam. It's softer than that. More like the shifting of water within a cup. Ripple and stillness. A hush inside your own hush. You are sitting beneath the mulberry tree in the rear garden, where no one ever seems to look for you. You have your embroidery hoop balanced on your belly, but your needle has paused mid-stitch. And then there it is, a whisper beneath your skin. You freeze, and then you smile. Slowly, secretly. You do not say anything right away. This is a moment just for you and for the small mystery nestled inside. Later, of course, you will mention it, and the entire household will shift on its axis. But for now, you are simply a woman alone, visited by a quiet miracle. When you do, speak of it during the evening meal, over stewed lentils and soft bread the room stills. Your husband looks at you and says, truly, his voice carries both hope and disbelief. Like someone glimpsing the shape of a long-desired ship on the horizon, you nod, gently. Yes, just now, by the mulberry tree, your mother-in-law weeps, openly. She rises from the table and presses her forehead to yours. A good omen, she whispers. Mulberries are for blood, for strength. You don't ask her what that means. You don't need to. You only nod, and the next morning, a fresh garland of mulberry leaves is woven and hung above your chamber door. From this point onward, your days are no longer your own. The baby becomes the axis around which everything spins. You are fed first, spoken to more softly. If you walk too quickly, someone gasps. If you rest too long, someone brings broth. You've become both sacred and fragile, a reliquary made of flesh and breath. Your husband begins visiting more often, but less for bedding and more for touching. He places his palm on your belly as if to greet his unborn heir. He does not press or prod, he listens, Sometimes he hums. Once, he even spoke a short prayer in Latin. Words he hadn't used since boyhood at the monastery school. In the quiet, he confesses, "I don't know how to be a father." You reply with a half smile. "I don't know how to be a mother." He reaches for your hand then, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like ritual. It feels like recognition. Historians argue whether husbands in the medieval period were truly involved in their wives' pregnancies. Some say yes, records speak of men seeking midwives, praying for safe deliveries, building cradles with their own hands. Others suggest the experience remained firmly under the realm of women mothers, nurses, aunts, and wet nurses, forming quiet councils behind the veil of domestic life. In your house, the answer lies somewhere in between. Your husband provides. He shows concern. But it is the women who form your world now. The midwife. Again, the nursemaid, with her endless bowls of gruel and her too specific dreams. Your cousin, who's born to children and speaks in metaphors about how the body becomes a chapel and then a battlefield. You begin to keep a little journal, not of words, but of feelings. You draw the shape of your belly each week, a curved arc, then a fuller one. You sketch little birds and tuck leaves between the pages, lavender, rose hips, a pressed sprig of marjoram. No one sees this book but you. It is your quiet rebellion, your slow-making myth. The virginity chamber is now something you pass by daily. The same bed, the same walls, but the feeling is different. You no longer walk into it as a girl being examined. You walk in as a woman growing a legacy. And yet, there are nights when your thoughts twist like ivy. You wake and sweat, dreaming of blood on white cloth again. Not from the wedding night, but from what may come ahead. Birth, they say, is a reckoning. Not every woman survives it. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. Some say St. Margaret once burst from a dragon's stomach to symbolize the violent struggle of birth. You don't know if she ever existed, but you light her candle anyway. One evening, the nursemaid brings you a charm worn smooth from years in someone else's palm. A tiny carved walnut, split open to reveal two joined figures. Inside, mother and child. My grandmother gave it to me, she says. I didn't have need of it myself, but I think you might. You sleep with it under your pillow. Every kick now is more than motion. It is proof of life, of becoming, of risk. The cradle sits in the corner of your chamber, half covered with a linen cloth. You run your fingers along its rim each night, wondering what color the child's hair will be, whether they will laugh like your brother or cry like your husband did when he was small. You've never heard his cry, of course, but his mother told you about it with pride, like a rooster at dawn. She'd said, there is comfort in these details, imagined or inherited. You begin sewing again, more urgently, tiny sleeves, blankets with scalloped edges, and the christening gown white as snow, stitched with daisies. Some days, the baby moves so much it feels like a tide turning in your ribs. On others, the stillness drives you mad with fear. Drink mint tea, the midwife says. Play the lute, laugh more. The babe will follow your mood. So you do. And on one rare afternoon, your mother visits. She brings a box of old baby clothes, yours. Mostly. She holds one up. A bonnet no bigger than a sparrow. You wore this during your first bath, she says. Her eyes mist over. You scream the whole time. You both laugh. And for the first time in weeks, the laughter is easy. When she leaves, she presses a ring into your hand. It was your grandmother's, she says. She wore it during every birth. You slide it on. It's loose, but somehow it fits. The chamber is no longer what it once was. Not a site of proof. Not a place of apprehension. Now, it waits for something else. The beginning of a new story or the end of your own. The day begins quietly, but something in the air tells you it won't end that way. There's a heaviness as the sky clouds drift low and unhurried, as if they, too, are waiting. The bees in the garden are subdued. The house is unusually hushed. You wake feeling distant from yourself, as though someone stuffed her bones with cotton. And your belly, it's different today, tighter, lower. The child has shifted. You can feel it. Like a stone slowly rolling toward the edge of a hill. You say nothing at breakfast. You sip your broth, smile faintly when the steward asks about your rest. But beneath the table, your hand clutches the hem of your dress, and you count the pulses in your lower back slow, rolling aches that arrive without fanfare. Like a tide whispering up the shore. By midday, the midwife is summoned without drama. No one announces anything. She simply appears, cloaked in her thick blue wool, smelling faintly of tallow and sage. She lays her hand upon your belly, listens with one cheek pressed to your skin, and nods once. Not long, she says, not yet, but soon. And with that, everything begins to change. The house shifts into its next shape quietly, efficiently. Servants begin laying cloths over furniture. A low fire is lit in your chamber and kept burning steadily. Fed with cedar wood and dried apple branches, a small table is moved beside your bed, set with linens, warm stones, and an earthen pitcher of sweetened wine. They hang thick drapery over your chamber doors, not for warmth, but for privacy. Birth is a sacred storm, and it's not for public eyes. You are stripped of your rings, your necklace. Even your shift is changed, replaced with one that's been opened at the front and carefully hemmed with red thread. To ward off tearing, someone murmurs. You try not to wonder whether it works. You are bathed again, but it is not like the bridal bath. That was for appearance, for softness. This one is for preparation. The water is scented with lavender and rue. Your limbs are massaged with warm oil. The midwife checks your legs, your pulse, your breath. She presses her fingers lightly against your ankles and murmurs something that might be a prayer or a warning. This is not a romantic bath. It's a vigil. By evening, the pain arrives in earnest. It curls low in your back, then tightens around your belly like a noose drawn slowly. You close your eyes and ride each wave as it comes. No screaming, not yet, only soft gasps and shallow breathing, the kind you learned as a girl hiding from your brothers behind a curtain. Your husband comes once, stands at the door. He does not enter. He does not need to. His part in this has been played. This is your play now. You, the midwife, the nursemaid, and the slow rise and fall of your breath against pain's advancing tide. He places a hand to the drapery, you see, the shadow of it. Then he walks away, and the women begin their work. You learn then that birth is a ritual not unlike war. Everyone has a role. The midwife gives instructions in a soft, firm voice. The nursemaid brings towels, wrings cloths, cools your forehead. Another servant feeds the fire. Someone hums low and rhythmic like a drumbeat carved into the air. You are told to walk slowly, steadily, around the chamber. Gravity is your friend, they say, so you pace, gripping a carved post for support with each surge of pain. When you can no longer stand, you kneel. When kneeling becomes unbearable, you lie down, then rise again, then squat. There is no modesty now, not in the face of this. You've been undressed, unnamed. You are not wife, daughter, lady. You are vessel, you are storm. Some women in medieval Europe gave birth upright, gripping ropes or the hands of other women. Others used birthing stools wide, armless chairs with a gap in the middle. These devices, though primitive, were crafted with reverence, carved with saints or symbols meant to protect both mother and child. In your case, it's a padded stool and the strong arms of the midwife that cradle you through the worst of it. Hours pass, maybe days. You lose track. There is only the burn, the push, the unbearable fullness. At one point, you sob not from fear, but from exhaustion. I cannot, you whisper. The midwife's voice cuts through like balm on flame. You already are. And then the world stops. And then begins again. A cry, not yours. The child's, a strange, wet, beautiful sound, like the tearing of silk followed by wind rushing in to fill the gap. You fall back. The world spins. You see nothing but ceiling beams. The midwife holds up something small and red and howling. A boy, she says, or maybe a girl. You don't hear her. Not the first time. You are too busy listening to that sound. Your child, alive. You cry now, freely, without shame. It feels like rain breaking through weeks of drought. They clean him, yes, a boy. They wrap him, swaddle him, hand him to you when you're able to hold something again without shaking. And you look, not at the blanket, not at the tiny fists. You look at the face, and you know. You have never loved anything so immediate and vast. You kiss his forehead. He smells of salt and skin and something older than either of you. You whisper a name you chose in secret weeks ago, unsure if it would ever be used. No one hears. But the child does. The midwife begins the after-work checking for tearing, preparing a poultice of comfrey and marigold, stitching you with trembling patience. You hardly feel it. The pain is now just an echo, retreating through the corridors of your body. The fire is low. The windows are dark. Someone sings a lullaby you half remember from your own cradle, and the virginity chamber, the room where you once lay in fear, is now something else entirely. It is the room where you became a mother. The morning light is thin and gold, like spun thread slipping through the shutters. It touches everything: the cradle, the ashwood chair, your pale wrist as it rests against soft linen. The child stirs beside you, wrapped in layers like a little onion, warm and pink and real. You blink slowly, your body heavy with weariness, but not unrest. It's the kind of tired that has a shape and meaning, the kind of tired that belongs to you. Like a badge or a birthmark, everything aches, yes, but it's the ache of having crossed through something ancient. The ache of arrival. Your chamber smells now of beeswax and mother's milk, of warm cloth and faint traces of blood. The evidence of the night's labor has been mostly swept away, but not all. The water basin near the hearth still carries a rusty hue. Your night shift is soaking in a bowl of light and lavender. The sheets have been changed, yet the weight of what happened here still lingers, like the scent of something strong that's been burned into the wood. They let you sleep, finally, after the midwife was sure the bleeding had slowed, after the poultices had been applied and the linen bindings tied around your belly to keep everything in place. A cloth doll filled with sage rests near your feet, tucked there not for play, but to absorb lingering bad humors, as is the custom. Some women swear by it, others scoff. You're too tired to do either. Outside your door, life resumes but softly. The servants walk more lightly. The steward avoids the particular wing of the house. Even the dogs seem to bark less. It's as if the world knows that something new and precious is inside this chamber now, breathing tiny breaths beneath a hand-stitched blanket. Your husband comes in after the second cock's crow. He stands for a long moment in the doorway, just looking. His hair is a little tousled, his doublet mismatched with his boots, as if he dressed in a daze. When he finally moves closer, his steps are cautious, reverent. He bends over the cradle and stares at the sleeping bundle as if it might vanish. He has your mouth, he murmurs. You smile. And your ears. He chuckles, quietly, not because it's funny, but because the moment demands something tender. Then he sits beside you and takes your hand. Thank you, he says. And it's not ceremonial. It's real. From the chest, not the throat. You don't answer. You simply squeeze his fingers. And together you listen to the slow, even breathing of your son. Later that day, your mother arrives. She brings a broth rich with marrow and a satchel of boiled barley and fennel. For your milk, she says. She holds the baby and hums the same song she used to sing when combing your hair at night. You didn't realize you remembered it, but your throat tightens at the melody. There is something strange and beautiful about watching your mother hold your child, as if two versions of yourself are passing through each other like ghosts in candlelight. The baby fusses a little. Your mother checks the wrappings. To warm, she says gently, unbuttoning the Top flap of practices. You wonder how she remembers these things so effortlessly. You wonder if one day you will, too. Around midday, the midwife returns. She brings with her a tiny, carved whistle, a charm of protection. To hang above the cradle, she says, carved from ruined wood. It keeps bad spirits away. Historians still debate how deeply these charms were believed to work. Some say they were symbolic, meant more to comfort the mother than actually ward off misfortune. Others argue the faith in them was absolute, part medicine, part magic, all woven into the daily fabric of survival. In truth, you don't care. You tie it above the cradle anyway. Better safe than sorry. The baby is given a name during the private naming blessing, a soft, murmured ceremony conducted by a local priest. Only close kin are present. You wear a simple linen robe, and the child is wrapped in the same cloth you were baptized in, passed down through 3 generations. It smells faintly of cedar and old prayers. Your husband holds the child while the name is spoken aloud for the first time. There's a silence afterward, not awkward, not grand, just still, as if the world is listening, committing it to memory. Names, in this world, are not just labels. They are prophecies. They are maps. Later, during the evening hush, your maid quietly mentions that one of the village women asked if the baby cried strongly or softly at birth. They say quiet cries mean cleverness, loud ones mean leadership. You smile. He did both. The maid nods, pleased. Then he'll rule wisely. You don't argue. Let them believe what they will. Let them spin stories around his little body like around a spindle. He is barely a day old, and already the world has made him a prince of something. For now, he's just yours. In the weeks that follow, your world shrinks, but not in a bad way. It becomes soft-edged, gentle, a blur of feeding, swaddling, lullabies, hummed into downy hair. You sleep when you can, dream lightly. When you're awake, you catch yourself watching his every twitch, his fists, his nose, the way his toes curl as if grasping for soil. Your husband visits more regularly now, brings little gifts, a carved rattle, a spool of imported silk, a painted icon for the cradle. He talks of futures, of teaching the boy to ride, to shoot a bow, to read Virgil. You nod and smile, but silently think, let him learn to sleep first. And the chamber, yes, this chamber is no longer only yours. It belongs to him now, to once. It was the place of proof, then pain, then passage. Now, it is a place of quiet beginnings. The fire still burns in the hearth, the window still catches the late afternoon sun in its leaded glass, but the room has changed in its bones. Just like you. The rhythms of the house have adjusted, not entirely, but enough. Once, you were the one who rose early, walking through cold halls to oversee bread making and hearth tending. Now, the household orbits differently. You rise when the baby stirs, sometimes at dawn, sometimes in the blue hush before midnight. There is no bell for that. No steward takes notes, but somehow everyone knows you are given space, not as a luxury, but as a form of reverence. The maidens speak more softly when they pass your chamber. The cook sends extra warm milk with cinnamon, swearing it brings down worry. Your nursemaid has taken up near permanent residence outside your door, her knitting needles clacking like a metronome of patience, and the cradle, tucked beside your bed, has its own sound now. The soft rustle of cloth, the wet flutter of a suckling mouth, sometimes, in the small hours. He coos, a high, curious sound, like a bird learning to speak. It startles you still, that sound. That he exists. You do not move like you used to. Your gait is different. Your body feels stretched, like an instrument played too tightly. Your belly has not returned to its previous shape. Your hips ache when you bend. You bleed, faintly but steadily, and you are told this is normal. 40 days, the midwife said, tapping her finger on your wrist. The body needs time, and so does the soul. The churching, a custom deeply etched into the fabric of medieval womanhood after childbirth. A woman was considered temporarily impure, touched by the blood of creation, yes, but also shrouded in spiritual shadow. She could not re-enter the chapel, could not take the host, not until she had been purified in a small, solemn rite. You aren't sure how you feel about this. You do not feel impure. You feel powerful. Wrecked, yes, but in the way cliffs are wrecked by the series shaped, made raw, but never broken. Still, the 40 days pass. You mark them with rose petals pressed into your calendar, one for each sunrise. By the end, the page smells faintly of crushed sweetness and ink, and then, on the appointed morning, you are dressed in white. Not the bridal white, not that symbolic silence. This white is simpler linen, modest, a thread of silver at the hem. Your mother adjusts your veil, then kisses your brow. You're clean, she whispers. But you were never unclean to me. You walk the short distance to the chapel with your head high, not defiant, just certain. The priest meets you at the threshold. He sprinkles holy water, recites prayers about sanctity, rebirth, the virtue of suffering. You try to listen, but your eyes stray to the stained glass window above. A woman, haloed in gold, holds a baby to her chest, the same baby, in 3 different poses. The image shifts in the sun. You wonder what she felt, that Holy Mother. Fear, joy, soreness in her thighs. You are allowed to return to the altar that day. But the moment you cherish most comes afterward, when the chapel empties and your husband places the baby in your arms again, without words, as if the whole ceremony was just a formality, as if he never needed the church to tell him you were whole. And now, your days lengthen. You re-enter the great hall. You listen again to the petitions of servants. You oversee the storage of grain and the pickling of onions for winter. You count candles and calculate soap rations. But you do it all differently, because now you have a heartbeat wrapped in linen asleep in your chamber, and that changes everything. The visitors return with their gifts, their observations, their questions, phrases, compliments. He's so strong already, they say, meaning, will he live past his first winter? Such long fingers, they marvel, meaning, will he be clever? Look at that jaw, someone laughs. His father's exactly. You nod, you smile, you say all the expected things. But inside, you hold him tighter. For now, he is just yours. Historians often remind us how precarious infancy was in the medieval world. Nearly 1 in 3 did not survive past their first year. Illness, infection, famine. A chill in the wrong season, any of it could mean the difference between cradle and coffin. So you are vigilant. You boil water for washing. You air the linens daily. You brew fennel for his belly. You massage his arms and chant tiny blessings your grandmother taught you. You do all this not out of fear, but devotion. You are no longer the girl in the virginity chamber, no longer the vessel being prepared. You are the steward now, the keeper of life, the watcher of breath, and you do not sleep deeply anymore. Even when you do, your ears are tuned to that one sound, that sharp inhale, that whimper, that rustle of cloth. Your body sleeps in segments, in the spaces between needs, but you find peace in the pattern, in the slow sacrament of giving. Your husband watches you sometimes, and something flickers behind his eyes. Not pity, not admiration, something deeper, a recognition. He sees the toll, the change. Rest more, he says once. You don't have to do it all. You smile. But I do, because you know this truth. No one else can quite do it like you. The cradle rocks. The fire crackles. The sun lowers. And in the evening quiet, you sing softly, not to him, but to yourself, a song of the girl you were, the mother you've become, and the chamber that now holds more than history. It holds life. Time slips differently now, like honey instead of water, slow and sticky, but not unpleasant. You mark its passing not by the bells or feast days, but by the child's growing strength. The way his grip tightens around your finger, the way his eyes begin to track movement, flickering with a blue-gray watchfulness that wasn't there before. You notice the changes in your own body too, not with sorrow, but with quiet awe. The curve of your stomach has softened, never returning to its former tautness. Your hips feel more rooted, as if the act of giving birth turned them into anchors. Your breasts are heavier, sometimes aching, always alert to his hunger. And your arms grow stronger, from the endless lifting and cradling, the rocking, the wrapping. No one applauds these changes. They are not embroidered onto banners or sung by minstrels, but they are real, and they matter. Your days are simple now, but never empty. They begin with the baby's gurgle, sometimes soft and wondering, other times sharp and impatient. He doesn't cry for the sake of it. He demands. He expects. You like that about him. After his first feeding, you eat your own meal, thick porridge with honey and fresh cream if the cow has been kind. A servant girl brings a cloth warmed near the hearth to lay across your lap, and you sit with your son on your knee, humming a nonsense melody. He stares at you like you are the whole sky. Historians sometimes gloss over this period, this quiet in between after birth, before schooling, before marriage contracts or dowries. But this is where the true weaving of life happens, where habits form, where love deepens in the folds of routine. It is also when the lessons begin. You begin to pass down small things, rhymes for remembering saints' days, the rhythm of prayers, whisper before sleep, the names of herbs in the garden. He is too young to understand, of course. But that's not the point. The point is the speaking, the cadence, the repetition, the layering of meaning day after day, like paint upon paint. The nursemaid tells you tales as she folds the baby's linen, stories of boys who grew up wild, then noble, of girls born beneath comets, fated for greatness. One story, told in hushed tones, is about a child who spoke only to birds until the age of 7, then grew up to be a bishop. You listen with one ear, smile, nod. You're more interested in the stories the baby tells without words, the way he curls into your chest when frightened by thunder, the way he kicks with fierce insistence during his bath. And yes, there are baths, but not like the bridal bath, and not like the birthing wash. These are playful, chaotic, full of splashes and shrieks. You warm the water with milk, add a pinch of dried chamomile, and hold his slippery body in your hands as he flails and kicks and grins, gummy and proud. The water laps over your wrists. Sometimes you laugh so loudly that the nursemaid clucks her tongue, but she smiles. In these moments, the chamber is transformed once again. It is no longer ceremonial or sacred or ominous. It is domestic, lived in. There is a small stain on the floor from a spilled bowl of barley. A toy carved into the shape of a bear lies forgotten beneath the chair. The once pristine linens are now mended with uneven stitches, your own, done by candlelight while the child slept. You are not the same woman who trembled on the edge of marriage, waiting for a door to open. You have passed through too many thresholds now to ever be the same. And still, the world expects you to return to courtly life, to the rhythm of guests, petitions, appearances. They begin, at first, as casual visits. A neighboring lady, recently widowed, arrives with her niece. They coo with the child, comment on his coloring, offer thinly veiled advice about child rearing. Don't spoil him too much with cuddling, they say. A little firm handling is best. They must learn discipline early. You nod politely, but you hold him tighter that night. Later, there is a feast, your first public event since childbirth. You are given a gown that feels too tight at the waist, too loose at the sleeves. You're not sure if your body has changed, or if you have simply outgrown that version of yourself. You sit through the meal, smile when appropriate, drink watered wine, and return home exhausted. The moment you walk into the chamber, you pull off your shoes with a sigh that feels like undoing a knot. The baby is asleep. You lean over the cradle, tug a blanket around his feet. He stirs, snuffles, then settles, and just like that, the feast is forgotten. Historians still debate how much autonomy noble women had in the raising of their children. Some suggest it was delegated almost entirely to wet nurses and governesses. Others point to letters and household accounts showing mothers deeply involved in the daily care of their infants. For you, the answer is clear. This child is yours, not because of law or lineage, but because of the quiet vows made in the dark, each feeding, each song, each sigh of exhaustion that ends in a kiss. Your husband comes to the chamber late one evening. He brings a small carved box, shaped like a house, no larger than your palm. A gift, he says. For the boy inside is a lock of your own baby hair, saved by your mother. He found it, stored with the family relics. You should have it, he adds. It's part of him. You say nothing. You only place the box on the mantel, beside the Rowan charm and a dried daisy from the christening cloth. And that night, as the fire flickers low, you lie beside the cradle and feel something shift. Not in your body, in your identity. You are not just wife or mother or lady of the household. You are the memory keeper, the weaver of beginnings, the protector of this new life's first stories. And in the stillness, you realize something beautiful. This chamber, once a room of judgment, is now entirely yours. By the time the leaves begin to crisp and fall in the courtyard, your son has discovered his voice. Not just the soft coos and sighs of an infant, but real, opinionated sound. Grumbles when he's put down to soon. Shrieks of delight when a breeze lifts the curtain. Unexpectedly, babbled monologues delivered with startling seriousness to his own fists. The chamber rings with these noises now. It echoes with tiny declarations and hiccup giggles. You find yourself laughing more than you used to, smiling at nothing in particular. Even the maids seem lighter. The ones who used to pass your door in silence now pause, peek in, and ask to see his mood today. He has moods, like weather, soft and sunny in the morning, stormy after naps, calm in the late twilight. You've begun to track them like tides. You also begin to notice the shape of your days again, not just their rhythm, but their growth. There is structure, not imposed by bells or chores, but by him. Wake, feed, wash, sing, feed again. Walk slowly around the garden if the day is dry. Point to leaves. Let him bat at them with chubby fingers. Carry him back when he starts to cry, heart pounding against yours like a small, earnest drum. You live this loop gladly. It is not monotonous, it is devotional. It reminds you of those tiny chain-stitch patterns you used to embroider into linens, one thread at a time. Repeated, careful, purposeful. A small pattern that becomes beauty. Yet the world, as it always does, begins to ask things of you again. Your steward begins to bring more documents to your attention. Land agreements, letters sealed with wax from unfamiliar estates, messages addressed to both you and your husband, though some, you notice, are sent only to you. The council wants your thoughts on a proposed exchange of land. A neighboring baroness inquires about a visit to discuss joint festivities for the winter feast. There is word of a visiting musician, rumored to be composing a ballad for your child's birth. You set the letters aside, not because they don't matter, but because the boy is teething. And nothing matters more than that at present. The teething begins quietly, drool, fretfulness, a newfound passion for chewing on wooden toys. Then, one afternoon, a full wail erupts so loud and pitiful it startles even the dog. You do everything. Cold cloths. Hunter rub linen. Yes, against advice. But sometimes customs override common sense. Clove water. Blessed salt. Whisper prayers. To Saint Apollonia, the patron saint of teeth, I'll be enough. The nursemaid jokes that he'll bite through his cradle necks. You don't laugh until 3 days later, when the worst has passed. You begin to wear him more now in a long cloth wrap around your torso. A method your grandmother called the second womb. It calms him instantly. He buries his head in your collarbone, thumb in his mouth, heartbeat against yours. You pace the hallways with him, whispering lines of old songs. One maid calls it enchantment. The child knows his mother's magic. She says, perhaps, but But there are nights, still, that undo you, nights when he will not settle, when your milk is slow to come, when your joints feel as though they've aged a decade overnight. On those nights, you sit in the firelight with him cradled in your arms, singing not to soothe him but yourself. Historians note that lullabies often held warnings or sorrows in disguise. Mothers singing of wolves, of loss, of longing while rocking their children to sleep. You understand this now. There is a loneliness to motherhood that no one warned you of. Not abandonment, not isolation, but a kind of solitude you carry even in the most crowded room. It's the realization that no one else knows your child like you do. No one else hears the difference between his hungry cry and his tired one. No one else remembers the freckle on the back of his left thigh, or the exact hum he makes when falling asleep, and that knowing profound, instinctive, incommunicable sets you slightly apart. You wouldn't trade it, but you feel it, like a bell ringing in a distant chapel you can't quite reach. Your husband notices, perhaps. He begins to take more of the burden, in small ways. He learns how to swaddle. He lets you sleep through the early morning cry, pacing the cold floor himself. One evening, you wake to find the two of them asleep together in the chair your son, curled like a kitten against his chest. The firelight casts them in gold. You say nothing. You simply watch. He's changing to dot, not dramatically, but slowly. He speaks more of futures now, of tutors, of planting trees for the boy's 6th birthday, so they'll bear fruit by the time he comes of age. He's asked the steward to send for books, simple ones, with illustrations, for later, he says. But you catch him flipping through them at night. One evening, as you both sit watching your son sleep, he reaches for your hand. Do you think he'll remember any of this? You look at him, at the cradle, at the worn floorboards and the moonlight falling across the sheets. No, you whisper, but we will. And that's the strange, tender truth of the stage. You are building a foundation he will never recall, but it will hold him all the same. It is invisible scaffolding. And one day, when he stands tall and doesn't need your arms quite so often, it will still be there, beneath his feet. The Virginity chamber, yes, it still bears that name, and whispers has become something else now. It is not a relic of your first night or a shrine to proof. It is a cradle of moments, a place soaked not in fear, but in the soft echoes of lullabies, of first steps, of the quiet click of teeth breaking through. It has been remade. As you have. It happens quietly. The first time he calls you mama, you're not even sure he means it. Not at first. You're setting down a warm cloth on the windowsill to dry, humming something and thinking something about blackbirds and barley. And then, behind you, from the soft heap of blankets on the rug, you hear it, mama. You freeze. You don't turn right away. It's fragile, like birdsong on thin glass. You're afraid if you move too quickly, it'll fly away. Then, again, mama. You turn, slowly, not breathing, and there he is. One chubby hand raised, a piece of bread clutched in his fist like a trophy. Cheeks flushed from sleep, and eyes full of triumph. He says it again, this time with a grin wide enough to show all four of his tiny teeth. Your heart does something strange. It folds, it bursts, it trembles. You kneel and gather him into your arms. And he squeals with delight, repeating the word like a spell. Mama, mama, mama. You'll hear it hundreds more times, thousands, in giggles, in sobs, in sleep. But nothing will ever quite match the thunderous hush of hearing it the first time. The chamber has witnessed many sounds by now. Your own gasps, his first cry, the creak of the cradle, the scratch of your pen in your private journal. But this word, this is something different. It anchors the space in new meaning. It rewrites the walls. And with it comes language, slowly, clumsily, adorably. He learns to say more by pointing at berries, up by raising both arms, no, by shaking his head with such dramatic flair, the nursemaid swears he's bound for court theater. The two of you begin to invent a private vocabulary, gestures, Nonsense words, shared looks. A language that lives only in this room, between these four walls. Whispered and cooed and giggled through long afternoons. One day, you catch your reflection in the polished brass mirror by the door. You're holding him on your hip, hair pulled back loosely, eyes slightly tired, mouth curved in mid-laugh. And you hardly recognize yourself, not because you look older, because you look complete. The girl who once trembled on this floor, fearing what the bridal night might demand, has been replaced by someone else entirely. Someone who knows the weight of a sleeping child, the rhythm of milk let down, the meaning of every cough and cry. It's not just motherhood. It's ownership of your body, your time, your knowledge. And of this space. The chamber's walls have grown more cluttered, ribbons pinned to the beams, charms woven of straw and thread, crumpled parchment scrawled with half-finished lullabies. The once pristine chest at the foot of your bed now overflows with tiny gowns, half-mended cloths, and a carved teething stick in the shape of a dragon. Even the bed is different. It bears the imprint of nursing, of midnight feedings, of quiet recoveries from nights without rest. Your husband brings in a new wool rug one morning, deep green, embroidered with tiny white flowers. For warmth, he says. But you know it's more than that. It's his way of nesting, of marking the space as something beyond ceremonial. The staff begins calling it the child's chamber now, more often than not, sometimes with a wink, sometimes simply because it's easier. No one has used the phrase Virginity chamber aloud in months, perhaps out of respect, or perhaps because the title no longer fits. Names fade when they no longer match their shape. Outside the room, the seasons change, the harvest comes and geese are driven down the lane in noisy flocks. The barley is threshed, the apples stored, and still, you remain here at the center of something small but immeasurably important. You begin to step outside the chamber again, a little more each week. You walk the gardens while he naps in the nursemaid's arms. You sit beside your husband. During evening readings, the child curled between you, drooling contentedly onto both of your sleeves. You visit the chapel on your own, lighting a candle not for forgiveness or guidance, but in gratitude, for survival, for the unremarkable miracle of every ordinary day. Some evenings, the baby refuses to sleep unless held. You pace the chamber with him bundled against your shoulder, whispering stories that blend memory and fantasy. You tell him about the moon, about the brave fox that lives in the woods, about the day he was born and how the stars blink like watchful eyes. You tell him about his grandmother's garden and how marigolds open with the sun. You describe the smell of fresh bread, the first snowfall, the way the river sounds after a storm. Will he remember these stories? No, but that's not why you tell them. You tell them because this is how love is passed word by word, side by side, from one body into another. Some nights, after he's finally asleep, you light a small candle and write in your hidden journal. You no longer draw your belly or press flower petals between the pages. Now, you sketch him, his curls, his dimple, his wide, wondering eyes. You record firsts, first tooth, first step, first laugh that made the whole chamber echo. And then, beneath those details, you write the things no one else sees. The way his skin smells after a nap, the feeling of his tiny fingers wrapping around yours, the ache in your chest when he reaches for someone else and laughs. These are the memories you gather in secret, not because they are forbidden, but because they are sacred. Historians often preserve the grand wars, treaties, births of kings. But here, in this quiet room, you are preserving the small, the quiet, the fleeting. And perhaps, in the end, these are the things that matter most. You blow out the candle. Return to the bed, curl yourself around the cradle like a guardian beast, soft but unyielding, and sleep not as a girl with duty, but as a woman with joy. It's nearing winter now, and the air in the chamber has grown crisp in the mornings. The fire in the hearth no longer burns out overnight, One of the maids, always the quiet one with a braid like a rope down her back, rises early to stoke the embers before you even open your eyes. You smell it before you see it, smoke and oak and the faint tang of warming milk. The baby stirs before the sun rises, as he always does. He's older now, no longer a helpless bundle, but a small person with opinions and purpose. He pulls himself up using the side of the cradle and babbles loudly, demanding attention before you've even shifted beneath the quilts. "Mama," he says, as though reporting for duty. You laugh, bleary-eyed. Yes, I know. I'm late." He has a new favorite trick, pulling at the hem of your sleeve with great determination, until you acknowledge him. Sometimes, just to amuse yourself, you pretend not to notice. He frowns. Then, after a dramatic sigh worthy of a much older man, he claps his hands and starts bouncing, issuing a command in baby speak that you've begun to interpret as up. Now, he gets what he wants. Of course, they always do. At this age, that is. You lift him into your arms. You feel the weight of him more clearly now. Not just physical weight, but something else: expectation, trust. A future stretching ahead like a road just beginning to be paved. He rests his head on your shoulder, quiet, for now. And in this moment, before the day truly begins, you breathe. You don't think. You don't plan. You just hold him and exist in this single, flickering second. Later, you'll meet with a steward. Later, you'll write letters to your cousins in the north, advising them on their own newly arrived children, and passing on the names of herbalists and midwives. Later, you'll sit through a meal with your husband's distant aunt, who will remind you that a second child would secure the line beautifully, as if you hadn't already risked your life to bring one into the world. But now it is just you, and him, and the fire, and the winter light inching across the chamber floor like spilled cream. The days grow shorter, as they always do, but inside the chamber, they feel longer. This is not a season of scarcity for you, it is a season of richness, of thick woolen blankets and meat pies sent up from the kitchen, and stories told beneath the covers while the wind howls outside like some forgotten ghost. He begins to walk soon, after the frost sets in. At first, it's a slow wobble between the chair and your skirts. Then longer distances, 5 steps, 10, across the chamber, giggling with every brave attempt. You clap and cheer and open your arms, and he barrels into them like a champion returning from war. The nursemaid carves a little notch on the wooden cradle to mark the day, his first march, she calls it. The boy's begun his campaign. He falls a lot, of course. The chamber is full of thumps and startled gasps, but he always gets back up. You admire the and with this walking comes even more curiosity. He pulls open chests. He pokes at the fire guard, which you swiftly move further back. He eats a beetle once and you scream. Though he seems proud, you realize, as you chase after him, that this chamber, once a place of solemnity and ritual, has now become a playground, a fortress, a world. There are scratches on the floor now from his little wooden cart, smudges on the window from his sticky hands. A strip of dry lavender has gone missing from the bundle hanging above the door, and you suspect he tried to eat it to. And it's messy and loud and wonderful. Your husband watches all of this with a quiet, bemused expression. He's everywhere now, he says, after one evening spent extracting the child from beneath the table for the 4th time. Yes, you answer. He is. But you don't mind, because everywhere he goes, he carries you with him. And the chamber, your chamber, is now a map of his discoveries. There's a game you play together now, just before bed. He hides beneath a length of curtain, and you pretend not to see him. "Where is my little knight?" you call. He giggles. As anyone seen a young prince would jam on his chin. More giggles. You pull back the curtain dramatically. He shrieks in delight. You scoop him up, twirl once, and collapse into the chair with him on your lap. He's warm and soft and smells of soap and sleepiness. This ritual isn't in any manual. It isn't documented in household records or passed down in sermons. But it matters, because it's yours. Historians still argue whether noble women were truly hands-on mothers or whether these tender memories are romantic projections layered over centuries of silence. Some claim the wet nurse and governess raised the child while the mother simply posed for portraits. But they weren't here. They didn't see how your body instinctively curls around his at night. They didn't hear the way he says your name in his sleep. They don't understand how a single smudge of berry on his chin can undo a day's worth of tension. You do dot, and no one can take that from you. Dot as the fire dims, you tuck him into his cradle, whispering the same four-line lullaby every mother in your family has sung for generations. Sleep now, seedling, soft in rain. Dreams will bloom like fields again. Stars shall guard you, wind shall stay, until the gold returns with day. He is asleep before the final line, and the chamber, full of warmth and stories and footprints, breathes its own sigh of rest. You lie down beside the cradle and close your eyes, not because the day is done, but because you have done enough. There's a new sound in the chamber now. It isn't the baby's voice though that still rings out, louder and more complex with each day. Nor is it the soft rustle of the cradle or the creak of the hearth. It's scratching. Slow, deliberate, dry, cool against parchment, because you've begun to write again. Not hurried letters to cousins or dictated messages to retainers, but something for yourself. A record, a weaving of memory into something tangible. You don't call it a book. It's just a ledger in a repurposed steward's journal. Pages gently stained with rose water and marked with little ink blots. Where you've drifted off mid-thought, you begin each entry the same way. Today, as if you and the child are one body still, one shared rhythm of breath and action. Today, we watch the snow fall. Today, we learned the word bread. Today, he cried when I left the room, but clapped when I came back. Small things, but you feel them echo through the future like footsteps in a cloister. He grows bolder every day, his legs steadier, his eyes sharper, his will undeniable. He points now, fiercely, at what he wants. He pulls books off the shelf and flips through them, babbling as if reading aloud in some forgotten tongue. When he doesn't like a food, he turns his face away, dramatically shaking his head with such force that one of the maids whispered, "That boy will argue with kings." You hope so. But more than that, you hope he'll listen to birds, notice stars, and remember the sound of your voice when he's old. The chamber bears the marks of his exploration. A faded handprint on the window glass, half a biscuit hidden beneath the bed. Your favorite shawl now permanently creased where he insists on sitting while you rock him. There's a soft joy in these imprints, proof of life. Unposed, your husband has taken to visiting in the evenings again, not just to see the boy, but to sit quietly with you. A book in his lap, your feet nestled in his lap under the fur blanket. Sometimes he reads aloud stories of clever foxes and foolish princes, and your son listens, eyes wide, absorbing the cadences even if he doesn't yet understand the words. One night, after the child has drifted to sleep, your husband traces a finger along the edge of your journal. You're writing it all down. He asks, "Just the ordinary bits?" You murmur. He smiles. "Those are the ones worth remembering." And you think, yes, that's why this matters. Because long after the cradle is taken away, long after the linens are washed and folded and stored, long after he no longer clings to your skirts and calls you 10 times in one breath, you'll have this to record of the way his head smelled in spring, of the first time he pointed to the moon and said, "Ball," of the crooked way he stacked his toys and called them a tower. Historians often preserve the wars, the rulers, the dates. But here, in this room, you are preserving the granular, the glances, the games, the quiet acts of care that build a childhood. One afternoon, while tidying the chest, you find something tucked beneath the folded christening cloth, a small pouch of dry lavender and mint, one of the old Virginity charms placed there long ago by your aunt or cousin. You almost laugh. It's shriveled now, cracked at the edges, a ghost of old anxieties. You leave it on the windowsill not as a ward, but as a relic, a reminder of who you were before all this, when your role was still theoretical, before blood and milk and lullabies transformed you into someone new. The chamber is quieter these days, but fuller in other ways. The baby naps longer now, stretched out in that loose, starfish way children have. You find yourself staring at him for long minutes, entranced by the small rise and fall of his chest. And in those quiet intervals, you think about the girl you were, the one who once rehearsed how she'd sit on this very bed, draped in silk, knees pressed together, hoping she was enough. You want to reach back in time, stroke her hair, and whisper, "You will be more than enough. You will be everything." The maids come and go, now more casually. The guards outside your door no longer stiffen when you pass. Even the steward has begun bringing documents to you here, unbothered by the sounds of wooden toys clattering or the baby demanding again from his place beneath the table. You've noticed something subtle, and all of them, a softness, a quiet recalibration of who you are to them. You are still lady of the house, but also his lady, the one who sings, while she writes, the one who rocks the future to sleep. There are moments, though, when you feel the world knocking again, the soft return of court obligations, the expectation of hosting guests, of considering a second child, of returning to your full duties. But the chamber whispers otherwise. Not yet. There's still time to stay here, to dwell in the in-between space, where motherhood still glows fresh and sacred, where small shoes line the fireplace, where your name is still said with reverence by the smallest lips. So you close your journal for the day, tuck a ribbon between the pages to mark it, you kiss his forehead, run your fingers through his curls, and murmur a line from a poem you barely remember. What is given in love is never lost. The fire burns low, the shadows lengthen, and the chamber once a place of proving has become a sanctuary of becoming. Snow finally arrives, not a light dusting, but a true, blanketing silence, the kind that turns the courtyard into a painting, the rooftops into white sails, and the garden into a secret. From the window of your chamber, you watch the flakes fall, thick and steady. They blur the edges of the world until all that remains is softness. The hearth crackles behind you. Your child is curled at your feet, stacking wooden animals in mismatched pairs, humming to himself in a tuneless tune only he understands. This dash is the quiet you once feared. You used to dread the hush of the chamber when it still bore its older name, when the silence meant waiting. Now, the silence holds no threat. It's a cradle, not a cage. You move through it freely, with the easy grace of someone who has lived deeply in this space and claimed every inch of it. The boy has discovered snow to dot at first. From the window, he pressed his nose to the glass, breath fogging it into a little cloud, eyes wide and reverent. Cold stars, he called them. Then, bundled in woolen fur, you carried him outside. The nursemaid protested. He'll catch his death. But you overruled her. Some moments are worth the risk. He squealed as the flakes landed on his cheeks, tried to catch them on his tongue, laughed a real laugh from the belly as he watched the dog gallop through a snowdrift and vanish like a clumsy spirit. You'll never forget that sound. And later, back in the chamber, his cheeks still pink, you rubbed his tiny hands warm and sang to him about winter wolves and silver trees. He slept deeply that night, tucked in a cocoon of heat and love and exhaustion. There are fewer visitors now. The roads are treacherous. Even your husband's affairs slow in the cold. The castle draws inward like a heartbeat in hibernation. It gives you time to notice things, like the way your son furrows his brow when he concentrates just like your father did, or how he calls the moon and insists on saying goodnight to it every evening, whether it's visible or not, or how his vocabulary is doubling by the week. He knows bread, Bert, no, and mine, of course, but also soft, which he says while stroking your sleeve, and book, which he now demands before sleep, holding one up like an offering. You read to him nightly now. Picture books, psalms, sometimes old stories you half remember from your own childhood. He listens with his whole body, eyes wide, mouth slack with awe. When you pause too long, he taps the page and says, more. Double quotes yes. Always more. The steward delivers a letter one afternoon, wax seal, thick parchment, a familiar crest. It's from your sister, she writes with warmth, detailing her own young children, their coughs and tantrums and recent feast day outfits, and at the end, she asks a question. Do you miss your old self? You don't answer immediately. You let the question sit beside your fire for a few days. Then, one night, with your son asleep and the wind rattling the window panes like knuckles on a door, you respond, no, you write, I think she's still here, just quieter now, softer, and braver. You seal the letter with a press of your ring and watch the wax harden like frozen wine. There is talk, now, of moving the child to his own nursery, a proper one, down the hall, beside the wet nurse's chamber, decorated with painted animals and a cradle carved with the family crest. The staff has already begun preparing it, though no one has told you directly. It's not tradition for a child to sleep in the mother's chamber beyond his second year. That's what they whisper. That's what the steward murmurs, gently, as if you might break. But when you mention it to your husband, he only shrugs. Let him stay, he says. He sleeps better with you. So does he. One evening, you catch your son trying to climb into your bed on his own. You watch from the doorway, unnoticed, as he grunts and kicks and heaves his round little body upward. When he finally makes it, he sits proudly in the center of the blanket pile and declares, big bed. You laugh so hard you nearly cry later that night as he lies between you and your husband, thumb in mouth, knees drawn up like a frog. You wonder how many nights like this remain. Not forever, certainly. One day he'll prefer his own space. One day he'll demand privacy. One day he'll stop reaching for your hand in the dark. But not tonight. Tonight, he sleeps close, the fire burns, the chamber hums. You recall how the space once held such dread, a place of expectation, of judgment, of rituals and proof. Now it holds something else entirely. Not just laughter and warmth. But freedom. The freedom to shape motherhood as you will. To decide what stays, what goes, what's rewritten. Historians often describe medieval motherhood as rigid, ruled by norms and doctrine. But they forget the soft rebellions, the quiet choices behind closed doors. The women who sang their own songs, held their children longer, said no without raising their voices. You think of them now, those women, and you wonder if they would recognize this moment. You think they would. The days are growing longer again, barely. Just a sliver more light in the mornings, a blink more gold before dusk. You notice at first not by the sun, but by the birds, their songs beginning earlier, their calls a little more eager, as if spring. As a rumor they're choosing to believe. Your son hears it too. He runs to the window after breakfast, every day without fail, and points to the sky, bird, as one of his most treasured words. Sometimes he says it in a whisper, reverent. Other times it's a joyful shriek, arms waving. The maids giggle when he does this, calling him the little herald of the thaw. The snow outside is still, thick in the shade, but patches of earth are reappearing along the stone wall, muddy. Hopeful little wounds in the white. Inside the chamber, everything is a bit frayed around the edges. Not in a bad way, but in the lived-in, well-used, full of memory way. The linens are patched. The chair is more creaky than it was a year ago. The toy box has become a trove of half-broken wonders, wooden horses missing tails, cloth dolls with mysterious stains, and a tin bell that chimes beautifully if shaken just so. You notice, with some amusement, that this room now smells of lavender, beeswax, and faintly of apples, his favorite snack, and the thing most often smeared across the table legs and forgotten under cushions. There's beauty in the untidiness, and the way things no longer look ready for guests, but rather inhabited. Your husband teases you gently about it one evening. You used to keep this room so ceremonial, he says, raising an eyebrow as he nudges aside a heap of wooden blocks to sit down. You grin. And now, he says, sweeping the baby into his lap, it feels like a proper home. You think about that word home. The chamber was never meant to be one. It was meant to be a waiting room, a proving ground, a threshold. And yet, through nothing more than days and sleep and small joys, it became home. Not through design. Through use. Your son begins asking questions now, not just naming things, but truly asking. What that? He says, pointing at a comb. Why? He asks when you move his cup to the table instead of the floor. Where's son go? He murmurs at twilight. The questions are endless, exhausting, glorious. He is no longer just a creature of hunger and instinct. He is thinking, remembering, forming theories. The other night, he told the nursemaid, very seriously, that the moon is hiding from the clouds because it's shy. You had to sit down after hearing that. The absurd, poetic beauty of it made your knees weak. And you wonder, as you watch him build towers out of firewood and laugh when they fall, if you finally reach the tipping point, the moment where you can almost glimpse the person he's becoming. He has preferences now. He insists on a certain spoon, a certain blanket. He refuses certain shoes with absolute finality. He will only fall asleep if someone hums, not sings. You humor all of it, not because you are indulgent, but because you understand something. He is learning how to have power and to exercise it gently. That's worth encouraging. Your journal is nearly full. The last pages have grown crowded, shorter entries, less elegant, but no less precious. He calls the dog Fuff. Today, he kissed my ankle and said thank you after I gave him cheese. He cried because the bread had a crack in it. These things would be dismissed by most chroniclers. But you, sitting here in the chamber's soft lamplight, understand. Their weight. Every strange tantrum, every illogical joy. These are pieces of the mosaic. There's a debate among scholars about how much affection medieval mothers were permitted to show. Some say children were raised sternly, viewed as small adults. Others point to lullabies, folk tales, marginalia, and manuscripts that show mothers tickling, cradling, laughing. You know where the truth lies. It's in the dash between and the quiet moments no one documents. In the way your son strokes your cheek after waking, and the way you whisper his name just to hear it echo back from his sleepy breath. No record will ever capture these moments as they were, but they happen, and that is enough. You've begun to imagine life after the chamber, more often now. Not with dread, not with urgency. But with curiosity. You wonder what it will be like to rise and not find him in the cradle beside you, to dress without a small hand tugging at your sleeve, to eat a meal while it's still warm. Part of you yearns for it. Another part clutches the present tighter, and both parts are true. Tonight, your husband lingers longer than usual. After your son drifts off, he pours you each a small cup of warm spiced wine. To us, he says softly, as if afraid the moment might break. You touch cups, and as you sip, legs tangle beneath the blanket, the fire casting gold onto the walls. You realize something. This chamber once a stage, once a womb, once a refuge has become something simpler. It's just a place where your life unfolded. And that is more than enough. There is a strange quiet the day they come to move the cradle. It has been looming, softly, like a change in weather. You'd known it would come. The steward had mentioned the new nursery was ready. Weeks ago, the nursemaid had begun calling the hallway his new kingdom, with forced cheer. Even your husband had offered, tentatively, only if you're ready. And now, here they are, two men in quilted sleeves, stepping into the chamber just after breakfast, careful as priests. They nod respectfully. Wait for your word. You look at the cradle. You look at your son. He's too big for it now. Legs dangling over the edge, always twisted sideways in his sleep, his little bear clutched like a shield. The cradle creaks when he turns, and he has begun climbing out on his own, usually to crawl into your bed and whisper cold. With a grin full of teeth, you nod. They take the cradle, not roughly, not unkindly, but it's still a removal, still a symbol. The room feels bare without it. The space beside your bed, which once echoed with soft breathing and rustling linen, is suddenly hollow. You stand there longer than necessary, hands still outstretched where the cradle used to be. He notices, of course. Children always do. He toddles over, wraps his arms around your leg, and says, "Sleep room now." You nod again, smile, kiss the top of his head. "Yes, my love, your sleep room now." You walk him down the corridor yourself, carrying his stuffed bear under your arm and a quilt folded over your shoulder. The new nursery is warm, bright, filled with tiny furniture and a window that looks east toward the sun. Toward morning, he runs inside with delight, climbs onto the low bed without hesitation, shouts, "My bed," like he's discovered treasure. You laugh softly, but your hand tightens on the door frame. He's ready. You're not still. You sit with him until he falls asleep, just for the first nap, just to make sure the quilt stays over his toes and the shutters don't creak. You hum your usual tune, and he yawns mid-sentence. The room feels different, like possibility, like departure. Later, you return to the chamber. Alone. Not truly alone. Maids still bustle in and out. Meals arrive. A seamstress asks for your approval on next month's fabric order. A letter waits on the writing table, sealed in rose-colored wax. But he is not here. And that's the difference. You sit in the chair by the fire. You stretch your legs. You feel your body in a new way as unoccupied, unburdened. Your lap free of elbows and knees. There's a silence that rings in your ears, not unpleasant, but loud in its newness. You stand, move to the corner where the cradle once was. You hadn't realized how much space it took up, or how many little things had gathered there. A forgotten spoon, a ribbon, a page from your journal. Folded and used as a coaster, you crouch, pick up the ribbon. It smells faintly of milk. You don't cry, not because you aren't moved, but because this isn't an ending. It's a molding. The chamber has shed one shape and waits for another. In the days that follow, you sleep longer, your back aches less. You begin brushing your hair at night again, with slow, rhythmic strokes. The kind you once did as a girl, before motherhood claimed your body and hours. The journal entries change, too. They're not just about feedings and first words. Now you write about distance, about watching him from the doorway of his nursery, sprawled across the bed with his bear, about overhearing him tell the dog, "You my best friend," about the strange pride and grief that come twined together like ivy and rose. You return to the chapel more often. Not to pray for safety or strength, but for thanks. You light candles for other mothers, unknown to you, but connected across time. You whisper the names of saints and think of your own child's voice, calling you mama across a hallway instead of beside your pillow. Historians write that the medieval noblewoman's role was mostly symbolic: figurehead, vessel, household, anchor. But here you are, real as breath, not a symbol but a sinner. And in this chamber, now quiet again, you feel your own shape shifting. You begin to read more. Not just poetry or prayer, but herbal texts, treatises on household medicine, accounts of travel to distant abbeys. You press dried flowers into the pages, not as decoration, but as reminders. This one bloomed the day he stood without help. This one the morning he called the rain sky crying. You speak more with your husband, too. Not just of duties or inheritance or estates, but of memory, of music, of what you'll tell your son when he's older, of what you'll do now that you sleep through the night again. One evening, he finds you in the chamber holding a box. Inside, your old chemise, a lock of the baby's hair tied with blue thread, a silver spoon, a drawing of a sheep with 4 legs on one side and none on the other. You're sealing away the era. He says softly. You smile. I'm preserving it, and you are. Not because you cannot move forward, but because you want to take the past with you. Carefully packed, reverently folded, not to relive, but to remember. That night, you sleep in a bed that is your own again. You stretch out. You breathe deeply. You miss the weight beside you, but you welcome the space outside. The snow melts a little more. Water runs down the eaves. Somewhere in the garden, a bud pushes through. You dream not of childbirth or cradle rocking or night feedings, but of walking, holding a small hand, hearing a laugh echo down a stone hallway. The chamber sleeps beside you, still full of its memories, still sacred, still yours. Spring arrives in earnest, almost bashful at first, just a tint of green on the hedgerows. A few wild violets blooming low and secret near the stones. But soon it unfolds in full. Birds raucous in the morning, bees thudding against glass. The garden below your window blooming as if trying to prove something. And with it, your child blooms too. He runs now, everywhere, always with purpose. Even if the purpose is simply to chase his own shadow. His laughter echoes through the corridors like a bell clear, insistent, joyful. Maids pause their scrubbing to smile. Guards soften their steps as they pass the nursery. Even the cook, stern and flour-dusted, sneaks him ginger biscuits when she thinks no one is looking. You watch all this from the doorway of your chamber. The same threshold where you once stood with trembling knees. Where you once awaited news of bleeding sheets and whispered verdicts. Now you lean against it with ease, a hand on the frame, watching a boy who was once part of you now dance entirely on his own. He still returns, of course. He bursts into the chamber unannounced, mud on his knees, daisies in his fist, declaring things like, I saw a frog, or I'm a knight now, with a certainty only a 3-year-old can wield. He throws himself into your lap as if the world outside is thrilling but exhausting, and you are the soft place where all things end. And always you receive him. You brush dirt from his curls. You listen to his grand tales. You kiss bruised knees. And name each mark a badge of honor. Your chamber, once a sealed space for transformation, has become a revolving door for wonder. He no longer sleeps here, but he plays here, hides here, finds you here when the day grows long and his energy has worn thin. You've begun using the room differently too. You write longer, letters, yes, but also reflections, observations. You catch yourself sketching sometimes poorly, but earnestly little. Portraits of him from memory, a profile mid-laugh, his hand clutching a worm, his bare feet on flagstones. You find yourself, more and more, turning the pages back. Not to dwell, but to connect. This chamber has become a quiet archive, of fears conquered, of roles embraced, of motherhood not just as duty, but as artistry. You've noticed something about the way you carry yourself now. Straighter spine, softer eyes. You no longer flinch when someone enters without knocking. You no longer shrink when the steward requests your decision. You no longer wonder if your value is visible, because you've lived through the proving and survived. In the garden, tulips nod in the breeze. You walk there often now, alone or with your son. He names the flowers in his own tongue. Bluebells become blue babies. Lilies are licky leaves. You don't correct him. There's time for accuracy later. You focus on presence now. One afternoon, you both lie in the grass. He points to the sky. Clouds are sheep, are they? Yes. And the sun is the king sheep. You smile. And what's the moon? He pauses, thinks, a sleepy one. You nod, storing the moment like a pressed flower. That night, he gives you a rock, smooth, gray, unremarkable, except he says, this one's special. It's a dragon egg. You keep it, mama. You tuck it into the folds of your old writing box. Beside the lock of hair, the spoon, the ribbon, a dragon egg for safekeeping. Because some treasures aren't gold. One evening, the physician visits to examine your husband's uncle. You overhear him speaking with the steward outside your door. She's changed, he says, referring to you. Yes, The steward replies. She's grown into herself. You say nothing, but inside, you feel it. The girl who once lay here, stiff with dread beneath silk sheets, would not have believed she'd someday host discussions of estate planning from the same bed while her son builds castles from socks in the corner. She would not have imagined feeling powerful in her night dress, or holy with ink-stained fingers, or beloved even with milk dribbled down her front. She wouldn't have known that this is what becoming truly yourself feels like. It doesn't roar. It unfolds. You don't announce it. You just live into it. And the chamber, once a ceremonial shell, has become a second skin. Historians often debate whether noble women in your time truly had agency, whether they were rulers of their realm or merely figureheads dressed in lace. You wish they could stand here. See your son press a dandelion into your palm. Hear the way your husband greets you, not with formality but with fondness. Feel the softness of the life you've built in this room, thread by thread, because agency doesn't always come with banners or oaths. Sometimes it arrives quietly. And how you choose to love. And how you choose to remember. And how you choose to open your door each morning, not as a prisoner of rituals past, but as the mistress of your own gentle empire. One morning, he doesn't knock. Your son, now nearly 4, simply marches in. He's taller, thinner in the face, his curls longer, his steps louder. He enters the chamber as though it belongs to him, which, in many ways, it still does. He carries something, a wooden sword, badly carved, probably borrowed without permission. There's a smear of berry juice across his cheek, and he announces, breathless, I'm going to slay the bread dragon. You stifle a laugh. The bread dragon. He nods, very seriously. It lives under the table. It's mean. It stole my toast. You offer him a ribbon for courage. He ties it to the hilt with great ceremony. This is the way of things now. Your chamber, your private sanctuary, has become part of his kingdom of play. Some days, it's a castle under siege. Other days, a pirate ship with your armchair as the crow's nest. Sometimes, it's a nest for baby birds who require urgent snuggling. You allow it all, because you know the tide is turning. He's becoming less baby, more boy. His questions are sharper now. Why do people die? He asked last week. Why do stars fall? Why don't I remember being inside your belly? You give him answers when you can. When you can't, you sit with him quietly and let him feel the question with you. That's something no manuscript ever taught you to. Parent not always with wisdom, but with presence. You think of your own mother sometimes. Her face is softened in memory. You remember her brushing your hair, not her lectures. Her voice in the garden, not her scoldings. You wonder what your son will remember of you. Will it be the songs, the way you always smelled like honey, the fact that you let him jump in puddles if no one else was looking? You hope it will be those things. The steward visits with a proposal. The lady might be ready for public hosting again, a spring feast, something modest. You nod, but your mind is already moving menus, seating charts, tapestries, wine. You remember how easily you used to do this before pregnancy turned your bones to soft wax and your nights into feeding shifts. Before the chamber became your whole world. Now it's only a room again, a sacred one, yes, but no longer the only place you feel alive. You accept the steward's suggestion, and the feast is simple, warm, joyful. Your son wears green velvet and dances in the garden with other children, his cheeks flushed and his hands sticky from honeyed pears. You sit under a linen canopy, wine in hand, surrounded by laughter, and you feel the shift, not a return to your old self, but the next version, a synthesis. Later that week, he falls ill. Not dangerously, just a fever, a few days of restless sleep and flushed cheeks. But your body remembers the fear, the vigil, the night spent sitting beside his bed, damp cloths and whispered prayers. You keep your vigil again. You hold his hand through every tremor. You hum lullabies from the cradle days. You sleep sitting up, one foot pressed to the side of the cot like an anchor. And when the fever breaks, when he wakes up and asks, hoarsely, for jam toast, "Please," you cry, quietly, with relief. He doesn't notice. He's too busy asking if he missed any dragons while he was asleep. You smile. They waited. The next day, you walk together through the walled garden. The sun is warm on your shoulders. He's still pale, still wobbling a bit, but he grins like a conqueror returned from battle. He points to a butterfly. That one's name is Harold. You nod. Of course it is. He runs ahead, and you stop. Just for a moment, to look back at the tower, at the window of your chamber. The curtains flutter in the breeze like a wave. So much has happened in that room, so much transformation, hidden from the world. You were a bride, once. Sitting at the edge of a too large bed, you were a mother. Breaking and remaking yourself between the cradle and the fire, you were a woman. Remembering how to be more than either. And now, you are all of it. The chamber will always be there. It has held your griefs, your loves, your secrets, but now it holds your story to. And that story continues beyond its walls. Historians argue over the purpose of such rooms. Were they spaces of confinement, of privacy, of power? You would say, yes, all of it, because no room is just one thing, not when it holds a life. Summer arrives like a hush that follows applause. Everything in the castle slows. The air turns golden and thick, carrying scents of crushed mint, sun-warmed stone, and blooming chamomile. You keep the shutters open longer now. Breezes flit through your chamber like guests who don't need introductions. And the chamber has changed again, not dramatically, but noticeably. The cradle's space remains empty. You never refurnish the corner. There's a sunbeam therein. The mornings, and your son is taken to lying in it with his books, toes curled, speaking softly to the pages as though the words can hear him. You don't disturb him. You just watch, remembering. One day, he finds your journal, the old one, the ledger you used when he was still swaddled and pink and barely breathing on his own. He flips through it with reverence, not reading, exactly, just touching, sensing. What's this? He asks, holding up a page with a ribbon still tucked inside. That, you say, smiling, is when you first rolled over. He studies it as if it's a map to treasure. I did that. You did. You were very proud, you tooted afterward, and scare yourself. He giggles so hard, he falls over. These are the memories that stay. Not just his, but yours. There are books now in the chamber again, stacked taller than before. He is learning to read in earnest. You hear him in the evenings, mouthing syllables, whispering vowels like incantations. He brings you wild guesses about words. Does this say dragon cave? He'll ask, pointing to the word garden. You always say yes. Because why not? You've returned to your role at court. Yes, the feasts, the ledgers, the planning. But you still spend the last hour of every day here, in this chamber, seated by the fire. Your slippers half off, the dog dozing at your feet. Sometimes your husband joins you, sometimes not. But it's not loneliness when you're alone. It's space. The chamber has become just that space. For reflection, for rest, for remembering. There is a blanket folded at the foot of the bed, worn and frayed, the one you once wrapped around your shoulders during night feedings. You've considered mending it. You don't. Some things should stay a little threadbare. It's how you know they were used. Your son draws now, endlessly. Birds with 3 legs, ladies with crowns, dragons holding hands with knights. He leaves. The pictures in odd places, under your pillow, tucked into books, folded into the folds of your robes. You find one left on the writing desk. It's the chamber. He's drawn it, crude, yes, but unmistakable. The bed, the window, the fire, and 3 stick figures, one with a long dress, one with big arms, and one small half inside, half out. You stare at it for a long time. Then you add it to the box. The one that holds the rock, the ribbon, the comb, the spoon, the archive. of becoming. There is a phrase that comes to you than something a priest once said during a naming ceremony. What is blessed may be ordinary, and what is ordinary may be sacred. You think of it now, standing in the middle of the room, as birds call through the windows and sun paints the walls with shifting gold. This room was once a test. Now, it is a witness. You light a candle. You open a new journal. You begin writing again, not as a maiden, not even as a mother, but as yourself. Still learning, still loving, still becoming. And though the chamber may someday grow quiet once more, though your son may grow and leave and forget to draw dragons for your desk, you know this: the room will remain, not as a cradle, not as a stage, but as a place where something important happened, where life unfolded slowly, and love, quietly, made its mark on stone. So now, dear listener, the chamber settles into stillness once more. The shutters ease into place, filtering the golden hush of late summer and the gentle shadows that climb the wall like ivy. The fire dims, not fully out, just a quiet pulse in the hearth, like the heartbeat of memory itself. You lie there, eyes growing heavy, as if the room has wrapped its old linen arms around you. The hush of night deepens. Outside, the birds have gone quiet. The castle holds its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, once not as a warning, but as a lullaby. Time stretches here. Minutes become threads, winding gently around your thoughts. Your breath slows. The rhythm of the chamber, the one you've walked through, grown within, rested beside, finds its place within you. You think of silk ribbons, folded blankets, quiet corners that once rang with laughter or tiny, uncertain cries. You think of bare feet on cold stone, of lullabies hummed more for your own comfort than theirs. You think of all the selves you've been right-eyed, trembling, fierce, exhausted, and how each of them softened into the next. This space has held them all. You're not meant to remember every word. Not tonight. That's not the point. The stories have done their work. They've lulled your thoughts from the edges of the day, drawn you inward, like tide pulling gently from shore. Let it go now. Let the last flickers of candlelight fold behind your eyelids. The cradle is gone, yes, but the memory of love remains stitched into the chamber's very breath, lingering like a soft perfume and linen folds. You are not alone here. The night wraps around you gently, and sleep, steady and slow, arrives not as a sudden drop, but as a soft descent. You are home, you are safe, you are enough.